Looking for a comprehensive overview of all of the classes in Unicorn Overlord? Well, look no further. You found the place. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel.
Unicorn Overlord.
Hello everyone. If you enjoy a comprehensive, in-depth coverage of strategy RPGs, regular RPGs, or games in general, then a like and a subscription would be very much appreciated. Thank you very much. Without further ado, let's begin with the Lord. Elaine, our Lord, is an all-around great frontline combatant and can fit into pretty much any squad early. If you've seen my video covering Elaine as a tank, you already have an idea of how he functions. He can protect himself and his allies with his various different passive abilities, and then heal up with his standard attack, or potentially neutralize cavalry with his anti-cavalry attack. Sword use gives him access to powerful early weapons if desired, but his base skills are already strong, so he prefers swords with good stats, not necessarily new abilities. He does have limited damage output until later levels and presumably promotion, and is more defensive in the early game, though different swords can fix that. His Valor skills can give allies increased damage and defense, as well as first strike or increased XP gain for one battle. His leader effect gives him increased Valor points on kill. He is essentially a better fighter, which we'll talk about next. Elaine will make good use of pretty much any equipment that you can find for him that will boost his offense and his defense. Anything that's going to make him a better brawler is going to be good here. Moving on to Fighter. These are early tank units specialized for guarding against ranged attacks like arrows, as well as more physical-based attacks that are still considered ranged, such as the Soldier's Javelin and the Griffin Knight's Wide Sweep. They can also buff their own defenses with Warding Slash, making tanking easier. However, they are limited in their ability to guard and deal damage early on, and have generally poor initiative as well. Although the Shield Bash skill at level 15 can stun enemies for control, which is pretty nice. However, they shine once more archers show up in squads and more ranged attacks come into play, especially when you begin fielding flying units like Griffin Knights. At level 10, they get the Quick Guard ability to improve their self-defense as well, so they really only get better with time. Much like the Lord, as we mentioned previously, sword use does give them access to good early weapons, which really fighters want more than potentially any other class to improve their limited attack options. They are a very equipment-reliant class, which is true to the idea of a fighter in classical stuff like D&D, so I kind of like that about them. They do have the Provoke Valor skill, which is very useful for funneling enemies into choke points, as well as its unique ability to force enemies out of entrenched positions and siege weapons. And while yes, we do have items that do this, those are limited. You have to buy them. Whereas Valor, you can earn over and over in a battle and use as many times as you have the points for. So Provoke, very efficient ability that you should get a lot of use out of. Their leader ability resists physical assist skills, and overall, it is a class that struggles in the early game, but should only improve as the game progresses. Next up is Paladins. This is an all-around incredible offensive and defensive unit with powerful support abilities to throw into the mix. It is of course aided by being the first pre-promoted unit that you have for a while in the game, but it should still scale well into the later game. It can attack, it can defend and heal in equal measure. It has the ability to perform follow-up attacks with Pursuit while guarding and healing allies, and that really makes Paladins versatile enough to fight in either the front or back rows of nearly any unit. They, again, wield swords and can use the various early swords you can find in the game well, although, again, they don't necessarily need them. And Cavalry, as a class, makes this a great squad leader as well, giving its squad far more move speed than they might otherwise have, allowing for quick maneuvering around the battlefield. Their Valor skill Heal is useful for quickly restoring an injured squad, and their leader effect Resist Magic Assist is vital for early game missions against Tower Wizards before you have better options to deal with them. Speaking of defensive options, next we have the Hoplite. This is your standard tank option. They're big, they're slow, they're sturdy. If you're familiar with Armor Knights and things like Fire Emblem, you'll definitely understand this class. They dramatically increase squad resilience by guarding against attacks, and do enough damage with Sting to clean up weakened targets, especially if they are at 50% HP or below, at which point they get a damage boost. However, much like in Fire Emblem, they have plenty of weaknesses. They are very vulnerable to mages, as one might expect, as well as hammer-wielding warriors and debuffing units like Housecarls. They also slow the team down due to their low mobility, but that can be offset if you pair them with some cavalry, so not the end of the world. Their Valor skill Fortress negates all stage damage for an allied unit for 10 seconds. Things like Valor attacks, arrow rain, whatnot can be negated by this, which is situationally quite powerful, so something to keep in mind. And their leader effect is shared with fighters, reducing damage from ranged assist attacks. Continuing on with Lance Wielders, we have the Soldier. This is a strong, balanced infantry class that is extremely versatile. They deal good damage to columns, they're sturdy, they're quick, and they get bonus damage against cavalry, effective at poking through to squishy backliners as well. They can deal extra damage to flyers with their javelin ranged attack. They just have a lot going for them. They can also heal allies as well as grant them guaranteed hits, throw a little bit of support in there, kind of almost makes them like a mini paladin in a way, less defensive and more offensive, but still. And truly, a squad of these can be a terror to handle. I've run into a few encounters where the enemy just throws recurring reinforcements of 3 soldiers at you, and especially early in the game, that can be very difficult to punch through because they're just sturdy enough and they can all heal each other. Much like the Lord, they can fit into nearly any squad and be good, if not great. Their Valor skill Life Aid reses all downed units in a squad, saving you valuable resurrection items, which is huge. And their leader effect Quick Rest allows much faster stamina recovery, which is also very nice for efficiency. Next, we have Knights. These are your mounted offensive experts. They deal double damage to infantry, they have high movement, their base skill Assaulting Lance can lead to infinite chaining kills as it restores an action point on kill, potentially sweeping entire squads with ease. And remember, Assaulting Lance only costs 1 AP in the first place, so it can just chain into itself infinitely with a little bit of luck and a little bit of setup. They have the Quick Guard skill, which makes them fairly resilient, blocking some damage on the first hit that they would receive. And they get an AoE stun as well as a cavalry buff skill once leveled, making squads of these truly, truly vicious. They are a great target for buffs, as well as any accessories that boost attack or give bonus actions, though they are vulnerable to lances, griffins, and magic. They do want some protection, unless you want a full squad that is just the glassest of cannons, which there could be a case made for that. I would not deny that possibility offhand. Their Valor skill Wild Rush deals big damage in an area on the map, increased even further against infantry, a very strong map attack offensive option, and they share the leader effect Quick Rest with soldiers, reducing wait times when resting. Moving on from lances to axes, we have the Housecarl. These are brutal infantry axe wielders. They deal huge damage as well as debuffing enemy defense to deal even more damage. They once again perform well in squads with each other due to stacking debuffs and their follow-up attacks. They also get an AoE defense debuff at level 10, as well as a debuffing counterattack at level 15. These guys are armored destroyers. Their follow-up attack makes them naturally one of the most damaging units in the early game and completely synergistic with themselves, and this skill set really makes them very easy to use. You don't really need to change a whole lot, just upgrade their gear as you find better stuff, slap them in the backline of a party that does a lot of physical damage, and watch them tear. Their Valor skill Vitalize restores 2 stamina to an ally unit, which is a very valuable skill if you need to quickly move a unit out of the way that ran out of stamina, or potentially keep pushing forward in a big attack. And their leader effect Barrier Breaker allows them to quickly destroy fortifications. Switching back from axes to swords, we have the Thief. This is an excellent frontline dodge tank or backline debuffer through passive point stealing and poison skills. They are very hard to hit thanks to their naturally high evade and their evade skill, which, if they have the passive points for it, allows them to guaranteed evade a physical attack, which is just insanely strong. Like the Housecarl, they are naturally synergistic with themselves, as their passive point steal fuels their evade skill. They are notably vulnerable to archers and other true strike attacks, that is their natural counter, but units like fighters can very much help to mitigate this with arrow block. Really, their biggest weakness is their lack of versatility. Especially early on, you don't really want weapons on them that give new attacks, as their passive point steal is uniquely powerful, and their evade is much weaker without it. So, unless you're going for some sort of backline, I have another tank in the squad, support type of build thing, I would recommend just letting them rock with their natural skill set in the early game until we find some truly disgusting gear. Speaking of gear, their Valor skill Plunder steals a sizable portion of gold from the enemy. It's great for farming if you have some extra Valor points laying around. I highly recommend that you use this as often as possible so you can buy some of that really great gear. And they also have the Quick Rest skill, making recovery easier. Speaking of that natural counter to thieves, we have the Hunter next. This is going to be a vital tool and utility piece for their ability to snipe flyers, scouts, and dangerous backline units like mages. It is highly recommended to have at least one, preferably more, in your army to deal with these threats. They deal 2x damage against flying units of all kinds, and while they have average damage output otherwise, at least without any sort of fancy support, they do have guaranteed hits, and they can target the backline automatically, so they can still find points of weakness to punch through. They are a good target for attack buffs, as they can grant themselves a 100% chance to hit, and they level to gain multi-target damage and Pursuit, improving damage output even further. Pursuit being a paladin ability that you also then pick up here that allows them to follow up ally attacks with an attack of their own. Very nice. Their Valor skill, Arrow Rain, does good AoE damage, increased against flyers, and it's a pretty large area as well, so not a bad damage option. And their Leader skill, Ranged Assist, gives them extra damage and can dramatically change the outcome of a fight for allies by allowing them to support by burning a point of stamina. Slapping these guys into a tower where they don't have to use stamina and fighting in that range will absolutely massively increase your total damage for a stage and should be a #1 priority if you have the opportunity to do so. If you're a little bit tired of small, noodly armed lads and instead want to pick up someone who looks like they could lift the entire bus, then you're looking for the Gladiator. These guys are simple frontline bruisers. They got big HP, big damage, and even bigger pecs, and their sweep attack makes them great at clearing the front line, while their self-heal makes them remarkably tanky. They do also level to get a counter version of Wide Sweep, which I believe is going to make them a pretty nasty force in the mid-game. That said, of course, everything needs its weakness. They have low accuracy and a lack of defensive stats, which means that they do want support so they don't get overwhelmed despite their massive HP pool and their limited self-heal. I found that they do pair well with Griffin Knights to allow your unit to sweep both rows of an enemy formation and just clear them with remarkable efficiency. Their Valor skill Toughness negates stamina loss and knocks an enemy back after battle, and their leader effect Barrier Breaker is shared with the Housecarl, destroying fortifications easily. Speaking of axe units who are big and burly, at least half of them are, we have the Warrior. Notably, the Warrior is unique for wielding the Hammer, which is an anti-tank utility piece, as well as standard axes as well if you don't feel like dealing bonus damage to armors at the moment, which you don't always want to do. Hammers give you a physical anti-armor option, crushing hoplites and fighters with complete ease, and their special ability Guard Seal gives you a workaround for high block units, again, like hoplites and fighters, letting other combatants hit for full damage. They level to get Assaulting Blow, allowing chain kills like Knights, which is very interesting. It's nice to know that there's more than one unit that can do this type of thing, and in fact there's even another one we'll talk about soon. And their Valor skill, Heavy Swing, deals okay AoE damage and makes them useful for clearing massed barricades. Notably, their damage output is good, but very limited, so I wouldn't get too invested in what these guys can do, at least as far as primary DPS is concerned. If you want primary DPS, that's where we have to talk about our next class, the Wizard. These guys are the damage king in the early game. They are massive burst damage DPS units that are also able to apply a damage over time effect. Their base fireball shreds any unit without good MR, and the burn will often finish off weakened enemies. They are, unsurprisingly, quite fragile, and unsurprisingly as a result, need a lot of protection to reach their full potential. However, they do level to get Magic Pursuit to give a magical follow-up attack for even more damage. Thought Paladins and Hunters were good for that? Well, wait until you're throwing around extra magic that enemies typically don't have the MR to deal with. Nasty. Very nasty. They make great use of attack point boosting equipment to spread fire around even more, and their Valor skill Blaze creates an Area of Denial Fire Whirlwind, dealing low periodic damage to enemies in the area for 10 seconds. Finally, much like the Hunter, they also have their own ranged assist, but this one is magical ranged assist. And again, when you have a lot of enemies on the board that are not very good at resisting magic, this one is going to be painful. If you haven't already encountered some tower mages from playing the demo yourself, then boy, oh boy, you are in for a very bad or very good time, depending on how you find yourself being able to deal with them, and you will very quickly learn that it's a strategy that you want to employ as well. Sticking these lads in some fortifications, a town, or a tower will make your life infinitely easier, I assure you. Moving from damaging magic to supporting magic, we finally have to talk about the Cleric. Nothing too particularly fancy or exciting about this one. If you know a cleric in literally any other RPG on Earth, you know how clerics work here. They are the bog standard RPG healer. They do have a mix of active and passive point heals, which does equate to massive healing output even at very low levels, which is very nice and very strong. They have no attacks to speak of. They can't even bop something with their staff. So the unit offense as a whole must be high to compensate for this lack, unless offense is not the goal. Once leveled, they can remove debuffs and even grant themselves a buff to prevent death when attacked, which is pretty fancy. Their Valor skill Heal is shared with Paladins and restores health to an allied unit. And most importantly, their leader effect Healing Assist, much like Magic Assist and Range Assist, is phenomenal for supporting ally units. As I'm sure you can imagine, instead of dealing damage to the enemy, this provides an entire unit-wide heal to your allies. And while it's not a huge chunk of healing, it can very often be the difference between success and failure. There are also numerous items in the early game to improve all of their abilities, from AP and PP boosting stuff to new staves that give them new spells to cast. There's a lot going on here that makes it so even though they're a standard cleric, they can still be a ton of fun and very, very powerful. Moving from very standard to less standard, but still in the realm of magic, we have the Witch. This is a mixed offensive utility unit, greater versatility than Wizards as a result, but not quite as much damage output in return. They do have the ability to freeze enemies solid and potentially take them out of the fight for good if they're not hit by any further attacks, which is insanely powerful. This is, at least in the early game of the demo, the single most powerful crowd control effect you can find. And their magic missile attack that they get after leveling provides good damage against up to 2 foes, which means that they can at least try to compete with Wizards. Really, their biggest strength early in the game is their Magic Conferral passive skill, though, granting an attacking ally magic damage on their next attack. This boost not only makes attacks more powerful in general, but allows you to punch through armor with ease. My poor Armor Knights, man, the hoplite, really being done a disservice here. I thought they were going to be so much better in Unicorn Overlord, but at least in the early game, they really suffer. Man, they really suffer. Back to Witches, though, they're best paired with allies who hit multiple targets like the Soldier, the Griffin Knight, and the Gladiator to make the most of this magic conferral ability. Like Wizards, they are fragile and require protection, but they can at least freeze things that might otherwise cause them harm, and they actually have 2 different Valor abilities at the start. Gravity, creating an AoE zone where enemies are slowed by 90% for 15 seconds! It's a really good map control piece. And they also have Teleport, which allows the Witch's unit to warp instantly to any ally or owned building to help fight off counterattacks, sneak attacks on your base. This is one of the more powerful units in the game, at least from what we've seen thus far. Similarly powerful, but for very different reasons, we have the Griffin Knight, who we mentioned previously in The Witch. This is an offense-oriented, dodgy frontliner. They have a huge damage output thanks to their sweep attack, then they get double damage against both grounded melee and cavalry classes. This is a row-hitting attack, much like what the Gladiator has, and it chunks. Even more impressively, this is one of the only quote-unquote melee attacks that is considered ranged and can hit the back row as well. So a whole backline of squishy wizards and clerics, not for long, because they're about to be in pieces once your Griffin Knight gets a hold of them, and God forbid you give them any damage buffs on top of that. It gets gnarly. Of course, we're not done. They are also naturally dodgy, have high magic resist, and they get even more evade against ground-locked units than what they naturally have. And to top it all off, as if that isn't enough, they also have a self-heal. This is by far one of my favorite classes in the game thus far, and one of the most devastatingly powerful classes that we have seen thus far in the game if you know how to use them properly. Their Valor skill Hastened Call doubles move speed for 30 seconds, which is great for traversal and navigating around dangerous opponents, and their leader effect, of course, allows flying over all terrain for their entire unit. They really saw flyers in Fire Emblem and said, alright, bet. We can do that. Probably even better. And I dare say that they did. Really, their only major weaknesses are general fragility when they do manage to get hit by physical attacks, and they do take double damage arrow shots, which bear a near guaranteed one-shot, so ways to protect them from such effects will be vital. Remember when we mentioned another unit that could do kill chains? Well, we've got to them. It's the Sellsword. These are massively powerful sword fighters with equally massive thighs that focus near exclusively on offense. They're some of the highest single target damaging units in the early game. Their heavy blade attack does huge damage, 150 physical potency compared to the more standard 100 potency that most other units have, and their allied counter effect that allows them to counterattack when anyone in their unit is attacked by an enemy increases this damage even further. Of course, once leveled, they do get the killing chain effect that we've mentioned previously, giving them the same pop-off potential as knights and warriors, and making them even more dangerous. With the right setup, and it's not a very hard setup to get going, a squad with even one sellsword can easily wipe an entire enemy unit. Of course, they do have very little defense to speak of, so support units do help immensely. But, on the flip side, their Valor skill Summon Warriors allows the summoning of NPC mercenaries who attack your enemies autonomously until they are either defeated or run out of stamina. And guess what? They don't typically clear the enemies out, but they sure do soften them up enough so you can get some more killing chains going. It's real nice and real nasty. I was flabbergasted when I first saw these units. Finally, their leader effect Greater Garrison increases the healing and stamina regen that they get when garrisoned, so slapping a unit with a sellsword at the front to hold the line on a bridge or something similar is a very solid way of holding the line for a significant amount of time. From one S to another, finally, we have to talk about Shamans. This is going to be your backline debuffer support class extraordinaire. There is no single better option for just completely shutting down a group of enemies than the Shaman. Like the clerics, they have no attacks to speak of, but that makes them no less powerful. They have numerous curses that reduce enemy attack, initiative, passive points, and even seal their ability to get crits, which is just brutal. Really, even one shaman can massively reduce enemy effectiveness, and I've seen that to good effect in my Lex squad, where I have one shaman and Lex, and suddenly Lex becomes the greatest tank on Earth because nothing is hitting him for more than like a couple points of damage unless they have magic, and even that gets severely reduced. This really is a vital class for assisting tanky units with frontliners like fighters and gladiators. You would be very much in the right mind if you feel like you want to get multiple of these and slap them into your squads wherever you can. Now, their Valor skill is not nearly as impressive as their normal skill set, but it does have its uses. It is the Clairvoyance effect, which reveals hidden enemies in an area, in a pretty large area, for 30 seconds, as well as increasing your accuracy by 50 in the area, which can certainly see its uses. If you're fighting a tanky or dodge tanky at the very least enemy leader squad on a tough fortification, slap this down and you might wind up having a much easier time hitting them than you would expect, even if you're attacking like griffins with melee units on the ground. Finally, their leader effect resists magic assists, much like paladins, and protecting them against wizards and the like, which is certainly not a bad effect to have. Starting off, as I mentioned, with Sword Fighter. These are backline, physical damage, true strike specialists with the capability to potentially do some dodge tanking on the front line, although that's a little bit of a dangerous prospect. These duelists live by the idea of death of 1,000 cuts. That is, until they activate a huge crit and obliterate something, but I mean, hey, can't really count on that unless you're counting on it through something like a skill that applies crit, but you know. Their attacks tend to have True Strike, making them excellent anti-thief or flyer specialists. And as I said, they can potentially frontline utilizing parries and dodges, but their overall fragility makes this a dangerous prospect compared to other classes that can dodge tank and still have some measure of resilience. Tanky units will stonewall them without support, and really they are a high-risk, high-reward gameplay style unit, which makes them exciting but very high on variance. They have the Valor skill Quick Impetus, which deploys a sigil that increases initiative by 20 for any allied units within for 10 seconds, and their leader effect is Greater Garrison, allowing them to recover HP and stamina faster when garrisoned. Overall, these are fun units to use, but they have been, to me, one of the least impressive on hand compared to some other potential dodge tanks, damage dealers, etc. If you love them, that's great, but they were a little disappointing for me. Moving on to Radiant Knight, and now, here's a class that is not disappointing to me in the slightest. This is a backline healing and magical defense champion, and they're also capable of dealing decent damage. It's not their primary goal, but they're certainly able to do it, which is very, very nice. They're honestly one of the single most versatile classes in the game, and personally, one of my contenders for the strongest generic class in the game as well. There's just really very little that the Radiant Knight does not excel at. Their ability to heal a row of allies is massively powerful, and their magic shield can save the lives of vulnerable allies like hoplites or wyverns. They are naturally self-synergistic with their attack skill Hashe, granting them passive points back on hit, and their high mobility as cavalry keeps them reactive on the battlefield, and their overall good stat spread means they can fit into nearly any unit well as well. They get bonus damage against infantry as cavalry units, of course, They have the Valor skill Guard Call, allowing them to deploy a sigil that reduces damage taken by allies within by 20% for 10 seconds, similar to the Quick Impetus skill of the Swordmaster we just discussed, and their leader effect is Resist Magic Assist. This is particularly nice as some magical assists are going to be truly devastating for a lot of squads, and unless you're running a Paladin or a Shaman as your squad leader, you're going to be taking a lot of damage from them. So just the fact that you can have a Radiant Knight in a squad, switch them to the leader, and generally be able to tank magical ranged assists, very, very nice. These are seriously such strong units, and I say that even given the fact that I've only been using one through my entire campaign because I only had one supporter make one, so thank you to Caffeine System for requesting Theiss. She's been massively valuable. I truly would not blame you if you recruited a bunch of these along with the uniques that you get over the course of the campaign and slotted them into squads wherever you could. They will always bring something valuable to the table through healing, through shields, and even through their damage. And if you really want to make things spicy, consider slapping a magic sword on them like a runic blade and watching their magic stat just pummel through enemies. It's a disgusting amount of damage. Moving on to Wyvern Knights. These are frontline single target damage gods, kind of the counterpart to Griffin Knights in this regard. They can deflect melee attacks, they get bonus evade against ground-based targets, of course, as flying units, they deal double damage against cavalry, and they can counterattack enemies. As flying units, they make great squad leaders to navigate rough terrain, and they do pair well with griffins, so you can get both a lock on single target and AoE damage. Conversely, you can make good use of certain spears that grant AoE abilities, including the Wyvern's exclusive Dragoon's War Spear, to be able to deal massive damage to rows of enemies or even the entire enemy squad in the case of the Dragoon's War Spear. These are truly a nasty, nasty class. They do, of course, have the normal flyer weaknesses, being vulnerable to arrows and magic, as well as having low stamina, but there has to be a downside somewhere, right? They get the Valor skill Dragoon Dive, which deals big damage in an AoE and also moves the unit to the designated location, which can be pretty handy for actually navigating around problematic enemy units. And of course, they do have the leader effect of flying. Similar to Radiant Knights, I wouldn't blame you if you had recruited as many Wyverns as possible over the course of the campaign. They just truly bring a ton of damage to every squad that they're in, and thanks to the fact that they can parry and evade attacks from ground-based units, counterattack, they have a lot of damage potential and are surprisingly durable. You know, yeah, again, you have to watch arrows and magic and things like that, but if you have any sort of anti-magic unit, like, oh, I don't know, a Radiant Knight, or any anti-archer unit like a fighter, and put them in a squad with a Wyvern, they're going to be really hard to bring down and deal a ton of damage in the process. Very highly recommended. Next up, we have the Arbalest. These are backline, ranged damage, and support utility characters, and it makes for a very interesting class. They are likely the second archer that you will get, and they are a vastly different one compared to the more damage-oriented hunters. Arbalests can do decent damage with their standard shot, but they really shine when inflicting afflictions and healing their allies. They can, of course, also deal with flyers as an archer-based unit, so they can take the place of hunters if your squad needs less help with accuracy and more help with healing. They're also tankier than hunters, and between their healing and their ability to wield a great shield on promotion, which we'll talk about more during the promotes class overview, they can be pretty decent damage sponges, especially if you put them on the front line. Similarly to soldiers as well, which we talked about in the previous episode, the fact that Arbalests can all heal each other while also spreading around poison damage, being able to target the backline, means a full squad of Arbalests could actually be pretty nasty to try and deal with when you're fighting them as the enemy, and could be a decent thing to try to put together for one of your own units. Like, they're pretty versatile, and the fact that they can also bring down flyers and generally be accurate against flyers makes them pretty nasty, again, even before you promote. Once you do promote, whew, it gets real scary. Not only that, but they do have the unique Valor skill Smoke Shot, which disables assist attacks for an enemy squad, making them a great include for nearly any battlefield. Seriously, like, the fact that I only have one Arbalest has been such a pain point for me, because I would love nothing more than to have a small army of them running around and just clouding the eyes of every single assist unit, like stationed in some tower, standing behind the enemy in a big wave of reinforcements that I can't punch through to get to them without taking fire from all of their attacks. It's so nice to be able to rely on this as a Valor ability instead of just using Wind God chimes all over the place to try and keep your units from getting obliterated. Notably, speaking of assist units, they are also a ranged assist unit, adding extra utility or boosting the damage of another ranged assist leader if in their squad. All around, A great unit. I love Arbalests to death, and I cannot wait to use more of them in my second campaign. Moving from ranged damage and support to frontline raw damage, we have the Dark Knight. These, as I mentioned, are frontline damage sponges with big burst damage potential as well as poison capabilities, and even have a nice dose of self-healing in there, as any respectable Dark Knight will in any given property. Dark Knight, honestly, is one of the more intriguing classes in the game for me. It appeals to my particular proclivities, big dudes with axes on horses who can deal huge damage after getting the snot kicked out of them and then regenerate their health. That is my jam. As a cavalry class as well, they have great mobility, and with the shield, they're pretty much just as tanky as regular knights, but also with the incentive of wanting to be hit so that they can hit back even harder. They are slow, but the damage buff that they get from taking damage allows for explosive turns when they do finally attack, and that does kind of lean into the fact that they want to get hit before they hit. They have the ability to self-heal on attack and deal damage through poison, which makes these men a very high-risk, high-reward choice. Of course, as would be expected for a class like this, they can get overwhelmed by very focused, intense damage, but really any support unit included in their squad makes for a far more likely survival scenario. They also pair well with knights to benefit from Cavalier Call, and overall, really, I think, should be considered as an include. Dark Knights maybe are a little bit less impressive than their promoted counterpart Doom Knight, but even so, they have a lot that they can bring to the table for you, and I recommend that you experiment with them, even if you just use like a unique like Gloucester before you recruit any generics to mess around with. They can be a lot of fun if you can wrap your head around how to use them properly. Their Valor skill Damaging Sigil increases allied attack in the area for 20 seconds, similar to the previous sigils that we have seen, and their leader effect Quick Rest allows them to recover their stamina more quickly when they do finally need to take a rest, which is certainly not bad for a unit that wants to be in the thick of it as much as possible. Next up, we have a number of unique classes that I do want to go over, similar to talking about Lord and Paladin that we did in the first episode, and first we have Priestess. This is Scarlet's unique class, and she's a mixed offensive and support caster with emphasis on the support. Really, Scarlet is quite the capable include in any unit that wants a healer, as well as some magical damage output. Not only can she deal damage and remove buffs with Holy Light, she can heal entire rows with Curing Call, which is extremely nice, especially early on in the game when you might not even have a Radiant Knight yet to do something similar. She also has a unique ability that allows her to restore the health and passive points of an ally who guards or buffs her using one of their own passive skills, which adds some really nice synergy with characters like Elaine. With her dual Valor skills, she can grant allies regeneration or, very powerfully, even resurrect fallen allies in a given unit and bring them up to 50% HP, a far cry better than the Life Aid skill of soldiers. While she doesn't entirely outclass clerics and other support units, Scarlet's ability to deal damage and grant passive points can't be overstated for her utility and versatility, and I do recommend using her if you have not yet tried her out. Finally, her leader effect Healing Assist is great. It's, just like a cleric has Healing Assist, so does Scarlet. And just having a unit behind one of your frontliners that can toss in some extra healing at the end of a battle really is quite nice, so it never hurts to have on a character like this. Next, we have to talk about Dark Marquess, the unique class of Berengaria, as well as a collection of enemies, which serves as a vicious frontline bruiser with affliction synergies. It would not be an over-exaggeration to say that Dark Marquess, in particular Berengaria's iteration of it, might be one of the most powerful classes, if not arguably the most powerful class in the game. Dark Marquess has so much potential that it brings to the battlefield, it's honestly staggering. They specialize in taking and dealing damage, and Berengaria's Great Shield makes her surprisingly tanky in the process. She's able to deal good damage while disabling and disrupting the enemy with stuns and AP reduction, as well as nerfs to their initiative and attack, and she even gains damage when hit similar to a Dark Knight, and can use pursuit attacks to restore her own HP after taking damage. Her stats are all around balanced, which allows her to evade or sponge damage depending on how you want to build her out, and has two really nasty Valor skills, one of which allows her to actually drain stamina from enemy squads, and the other, which is just the fighter's provoke, but bigger, that allows her to provoke enemies in an entire area. She has the leader effect of Greater Garrison, allowing her to restore her HP and stamina faster when garrisoned, and really, overall, I just can't overstate how powerful Berengaria is with the Dark Marquess class. You can put her as the front line of pretty much any squad, and she'll perform well on her own, as she has all of her own synergies baked into her kit. Then if you include anything in her squad that is going to give her any sort of support or inflict even more afflictions on the enemy, and you're going to have a character and a unit on your hands that are nigh unstoppable. I really can't recommend enough that you use Berengaria and build a specific unit to take advantage of her strengths. You will be so happy that you did. She's one of my favorites. She's the character that I decided to marry in my first run of the game. She's awesome. Use her and use Dark Marquess. And also watch out when the enemy's using Dark Marquess against you, because they are pretty scary as well, but Berengaria is really good. Moving from Dark Marquess to more Holy Princess, but a little bit more of a Holy Bruiser Princess, we have Valkyria, which is Virginia and Queen Elenia's class line. This is a versatile frontline duelist that can handle multiple enemy classes and skills thanks to her own skills, and even uniquely comes equipped with 2 shields simultaneously, giving her the ability to get a fair bit of stat increases and abilities. The overall tankiness and damage versatility of the Valkyria makes her a great frontliner for any squad. Her Iron Veil ability dramatically increases squad survivability for next to no cost. Her different skills that increase effectiveness against armored units or flyers make it really easy for her to fill in slots that otherwise would require multiple dedicated classes in a unit to be able to handle. So now you can focus on doing other things like support or extra damage or what have you, and let Virginia handle the flyers and the armor units. She has 2 Valor skills to go with her 2 shields, one of which is aptly the Dual Shield ability, as well as the Blade Wave ability. Dual Shield grants cover from assist attacks, very nice, and Blade Wave deals big damage in a wide area of effect. Her leader effect is resist range assist, similar to fighters, and it is always a nice include if you are running up on a big squad of archers in towers and need to be able to take a pummeling so you can actually get to them and take them out. It's a line of royalty here that we're continuing on with, as we are now talking about the Prince class, unique class of Gilbert of Drakenhold. The Prince is a support and buff master. His stats are perfectly balanced. He's not built to be a main combat unit, but that's okay. And his skills all focus around buffing allies and debuffing enemies. He can improve the defense, offense, initiative, and guard rate of his unit, as well as granting True Strike to rows of allies, where his Banishing Strike ability can remove the buffs of enemies. He can also use Valor to grant allied units passive points and active points, which is a huge boon in different types of scenarios, and his leader effect is shared with Elaine, the Morale Boost ability. This gives increased Valor generation for his unit when they beat an enemy, which, especially in later game maps where you want to really be able to spam a bunch of Valor abilities and also get all of your units out on the battlefield, this can be a huge boon and is extremely recommended. Prince is a great include for any unit, much like most of the unique classes are, but in particular Prince because he's able to buff all of the important stats of your allies and just make them better, which is awesome. We have 2 more unique classes to talk about here, but we are now moving into the Elven units, having finally cleared the majority of the human units. First up, we have the Elven Augur, one of 2 of the unique classes of the Elven Sisters of Elheim. This is a mixed magical damage and support unit, focusing more on the damage and afflictions. It has a unique mechanic that it shares with its sister class of Fairies, a mechanic that allows it to pop off for huge healing and damage with the right setup. Fairies, if you did not know, grant increased effects to all of the relevant skills of the Elven Augur and its sister class, the Elven Sibyl, and you generally want to be able to spam as many of these out as possible in any given fight, so you can end it with a huge skill that is going to restore your allies and to destroy your enemies. The Augur is able to heal its allies, but it's more focused on stunning enemies to prevent them from dealing damage in the first place, and it is adept at granting itself increased active and passive points to further promote combos with fairies. Its Valor skill Distance Swap is a really unique and fun little piece, allowing you to change the position of the user and an allied squad at a distance, while its skill Quick Call ends the wait timer for all nearby allies. The Augur is a welcome addition to any squad with even greater potential if built around, and while I haven't had the chance to experiment with it too much, I can definitely see the potential in it, and I've heard the stories from others who have used it that really show just how devastatingly powerful it can be. Finally, it has the leader effect Magic Assist, which we know is very strong. Whether you have the Augur as your squad leader or she's in a squad with another magic user, either way, she's going to be dealing a lot of good damage at range for free. And of course, talking about the Elven Augur, we must talk about the Elven Sibyl. This is also a mixed magical damage and support unit, but this time focusing on the healing and support side. Similarly, has the Fairy mechanic, which again allows huge pop-offs, typically for healing with the Sibyl. can not only heal allies, but shield them from debuffs as well, which is very nice, and is also adept at granting itself increased active and passive points, again, to combo off with fairies. Now, the Valor skills here are, well, slightly different. One of them is, anyway. The Sybil has the Rescue skill, which, for anyone who's a fan of Fire Emblem and knows Rescue strats, or even just the Rescue mechanic in general, should be quite familiar. Rescue here allows you to teleport a distant ally to the user, circumnavigating any sorts of terrain, getting them out of range of dangerous enemies, etc., etc., while again, Quick Call ends the wait timer for all nearby allies. Really, anything that I said about the Elven Augur is still applicable to the Elven Sybil, just replace the focus on offense with defense and healing, and you've got essentially the same class. They work great together, they can make two separate units better for their presence, they're just really all around very strong classes, and I highly recommend that you use them. And of course, perhaps unsurprisingly, the Sybil, focusing on healing, has the leader effect Healing Assist over the Magic Assist of the Augur, which again, as we talked about with Scarlet, is phenomenal. We're coming up on our last two classes for this iteration of the overall class overview, the Elven Fencer and then the Elven Archer. The Fencer is a very interesting class. It is a versatile but fragile mixed physical magical damage dealer, much like all other Elven units tend to be. Its mixed damage output makes dealing with a variety of enemies far easier, and has good control as well thanks to its stuns and the ability to drain AP off of cavalry. They can also level into good evade tanks, however they are fragile and need cover just like a Thief or Griffin, but fortunately have some nice self-synergies with evades, granting themselves extra bonuses when they do dodge an attack. They also have a few nice support abilities to aid allies and remove debuffs from themselves, and interestingly, can also equip tomes to confer effects to allies' attacks. Previously, we had seen that this was just something that would be available on certain magical classes like witches and mages and wizards and the like. Basically anything that was going to be a ranged magical damage dealer, but now the Fencer can equip them as well. So if you don't have one of those on hand, but you want to be able to flame conferral or ice conferral something, you can consider an Elven Fencer, and they'll be able to get the job done just fine. Their Valor skill, Thundercloud, creates a damaging, moving area of effect field that can soften up enemy squads and prevent reinforcements from spawning, which is very nice. And, perhaps unsurprisingly, they have the leader effect Magical Assist. People had seen me as kind of being down on Elven units, and I was a little bit when I first got access to them. And I still hold that mentality a little bit, something we'll talk about with the Elven Archer here as well. Not because they aren't good, but because they have so many different things that they're doing at once. You need to know how to build into what you want them to do and build around them for them to reach their maximum potential. Compared to some of the human classes, or even like later things we'll talk about, like bestial classes, things like that, they do need a little bit more caring support to use properly. But once you do, that versatility that they have, once you can bring out its full potential, is devastating. Make no mistake. And of course, we did mention the Elven Archer, and it's time to talk about that now. Elven Archers, similar to Fencers, are a ranged mixed damage dealer and support unit. Similar to the Fencer before them, these are mixed damage dealers, but this time at range, as well as having a nice suite of support skills as well. These Archer units distinguish themselves from Hunters and Arbalests thanks to their magical attacks and debuff resistance. They can, of course, still snipe enemy backline units or flyers with their Wind Arrow, and they are also able to grant allies magic damage similarly to Witches. They gain the ability to heal the entire party if targeted by a heal themselves, something that can feel a little limiting until you get the hang of actually proccing it, but once you do is very powerful, much like Elven units themselves. And finally, they get the ability to freeze enemies with arrows and grant allies a single negation of a debuff, both very powerful abilities. Their Valor skill is Merciful Rain, creating a moving rainstorm that heals allies in the area of effect, and their leader effect is Ranged Assist, but it is worth noting that these are kind of the worst class for ranged assisting because they have lower physical attack compared to other archers like Hunters and Arbalests. So if you're going to do a ranged support squad, by all means have an Elven Archer in it, just don't have them as the leader because that's going to nerf the damage of your actual ranged assist quite significantly. As far as the Elven Archer is concerned, I mean, this is a very strong unit, don't get me wrong. The fact that you're able to, again, snipe the backline, snipe flyers, deal good damage, and potentially if you have something in the backline that's armored or something that you just want to be able to deal a bit more damage to that doesn't have good magic resist, the Elven Archer is going to be the way that you can go about that. Combine that with the fact that they can heal the entire party, they can grant allies resistance to debuffs, etc., freeze enemies, like there's a lot going on here. They're just kind of a growth unit that needs to get all of their skills unlocked to really reach their max potential, as opposed to other classes that are ready to go right out of the box and just get better with time. And much like the Elven Fencer, you do want to know how to use this class and what sort of squad it wants to be in for it to really perform at its best. If you just try to slap it in somewhere, it won't perform nearly as well. You got to know how to draw the power out of these elves. High Lord, unsurprisingly, is Elaine's promotion and has to be one of the single most dramatic changes out of all of the promoted classes. He gets an extra accessory slot on promotion, and he also gains a greater focus on physical damage dealing compared to the more tank-focused Lord, while still being capable of tanking, which is really nice. He gets the addition of a mount, making him a cavalry unit, a trait which massively increases Elaine's anti-infantry capabilities, as well as increasing his move range when he is the leader of his squad. His new skills include Rapid Order at level 25 and Spinning Edge at level 30. Rapid Order boosts all allies' initiative at the start of battle by 20, an okay skill if you're building an all-out blitz team or just have no other start of battle options, but it is not typically my favorite compared to some other nasty capabilities that we will talk about later on in this video. Spinning Edge, meanwhile, is definitely Elaine's best attack and potentially one of the best attacks in the game. It attacks a row of enemies, ignores 50% of their defense, and grants Elaine +1 passive point if he kills something, allowing him to do more tanking, more blocking for allies, or potentially using other support skills that you have accessories equipped on him for. This attack alone, honestly, just is what makes Elaine into an offensive powerhouse. Lean Edge is great, Cavalry Slayer is great, but Spinning Edge just devastates enemies, especially if they're infantry. Now granted, you do lose a lot of stamina in the change from infantry to cavalry, but that isn't really a huge deal. I say a lot, it's 1 point, but I mean 1 point can be the difference, especially on higher difficulty levels like Trues and Oiron. So it is something to consider, but at least in my playtime in Expert, has not been too big of a deal. We'll see if I have to revisit that opinion once I get to High Lord on Trues and Oiron. Seriously though, like, you don't want to sleep on Elaine's promotion. Get High Lord as soon as possible. It should probably be your first promotion for the extra move speed on the map and just for the massive increase in power that Elaine gets. He's not just a tank anymore. He can tank just as effectively as he did before, but also just slay out, which is great. Speaking of tanks, we have to talk about Vanguard next. This is Fighter's promotion, and it is a much-needed boost to help the class fulfill its role. There's been a lot of pushback. People have had a lot of opinions about Fighter, about Vanguard, but I truly do feel that Vanguard is actually a very, very solid class. It's not going to be S tier or anything like that, but people very much underserve this class, and that's surprising to me because it does have a lot on offer in terms of tanking. You get an extra accessory slot on promo. Beyond the increased base stats that you get, you also get 2 new skills. Defender at level 20 and Provoke, which is different from the Valor skill Provoke that Fighters and Vanguards also have, at level 25. Defender is a very nice single target attack, hitting twice for 75 physical potency, granting the user plus 50% defense, which is awesome, and +1 passive point if the attack lands, similar to Spinning Edge killing something, but at this point you don't even need to kill anything, you can just land the hit. And again, that's going to allow you to cover for your allies or guard yourself even more effectively. It does cost 2 AP, but I think it's worth it because this attack is a big step up from Warding Slash. Provoke, on the other hand, is a situationally useful start of battle skill, forcing a row of enemies to target the Vanguard while buffing his guard rate by 50%. Now, this is very, very nice when fighting a row of backline archers or other sorts of physical-based backline enemies, because it'll protect your backline with one action if they're ranged units, or make sure that all of those physical attacks are landing on your Vanguard if it's something like, say, a bunch of hoplites or things like that. Of course, if it's mages, you're not going to want to do that unless you have some really heavy dedicated anti-magic shields that you can put on your Vanguard, in which case it'll actually be useful, but really this allows you to use something like a utility shield because you get that 50% guard rate buff, so you can have something that maybe isn't necessarily maxed out on guard rate while still being extremely tanky in the process. With this skill, a lone Vanguard on the front line can take full aggro, fulfilling their tank role completely by aggroing the enemy backline, and of course having the enemy front line more often than not only being able to target your front line. If your Vanguard is the only thing up there, or maybe he's like co-tanking with something, boom, you're solid. This really does allow them to fully fulfill their tank role in a way that's different, but I would say equal to Legionnaires, and I really do enjoy the playstyle of Vanguard. Just make sure, again, that you have some magic shields and or healing on hand to help keep them up, but, I mean, again, it would be the same thing with like a Legionnaire or a Werebear or something, so Their Valor skill becomes Provoke 2, targeting enemies in a wide area and forcing them towards the user. This is, of course, massively useful for pulling groups out of cover and into bad positions, since you can hit in an area and pull potentially a very heavily massed group of enemies. Again, I love Vanguards. I think they're phenomenal. I really think that people are underselling how powerful they can be. Legionnaires are not your only physical tank out there. Neither are Werebears. You gotta give Vanguards a second chance. They have okay damage output, especially if you give them a sword that has a special unique attack on it. And with things like Provoke and their ability to block arrows, they can really be a major thorn in the side of any enemy. You gotta watch magic, yeah, you gotta watch hammers, yeah, but again, you can say the same thing of any of your other physical tanks. It's not that big of a deal. Moving on to Sergeant. This is the promoted class of the Soldier and is a class that focuses even more on buffs while still being very versatile. They also get an extra accessory slot on promotion. They get new skills Honed Spear and Active Gift, which come in at level 20 and 25 respectively. Honed Spear is a column attack like Long Thrust with 130 physical potency, costs 2 active points, gets plus 50 potency if the user is buffed, which is pretty nice, and Cavalry can't guard against it. This is very powerful in a buff-centric squad, such as an All-Sergeants squad, thanks to Keen Call making that buff damage a guaranteed crit, which can be really nasty, but there are a number of ways to go about activating this secondary effect. Meanwhile, Active Gift is a very interesting support skill. It costs you 2 passive points to use, but it gives an ally plus 1 active point after they use an active skill. This is a nice way to get around limited AP boosting items or enable specific combos. It's not as directly useful as things like extra crits from Keen Call in general use, but when it is going to be useful for you, it's going to be very useful. Just the fact that you can guarantee that maybe a Cell Sword or a Lance Connect that only has 3 AP might actually be able to get 2 Bastard's Cross in there, which we'll talk about later on in the video. Using this skill, if you don't have a way to get them up to 4 AP, that's really powerful. That's a lot of extra potential damage output, and that's before you even start considering things that are going to be more combo-tastic. This is definitely a fun one, but it will be more situational than something like Keen Call. The Valor skill upgrades to Life Aid 2, which heals and reses fallen allies in an area. This is very nice. It's still only a 1 HP heal, but being able to group all of your guys together, pop 1 Life Aid 2 for 1 Valor point, and get everyone who is downed back on their feet can be a huge difference maker, especially if you combine that with something like Heal 2 from promoted clerics to then heal everyone in that area as well. I love Sergeants. They have so much fun combo potential. They're very good as a stacked, like, mono class unit. They just have a lot going for them, and they're pretty happy to slot into any given unit. Next up, we have Vikings. This, oddly, I've had some pushback on when talking about Vikings before. I think Vikings are phenomenal. They might not be as overwhelmingly powerful as their base form Housecarl is at the contextual points in the game they're going to be using them, but they are still very strong. Again, these are the promotion of Housecarl that leans even further into physical defense shredding with added ally buffs as well. They get a shield slot on promotion, helping with their overall poor survivability and potentially giving them some more utility options. And then get the new skills Widebreaker and Warhorn, which come in at level 20 and 25, respectively. Widebreaker is a row attack, deals 100 physical potency, costs 2 AP, reduces enemy defense by 30%, and gets a damage buff if enemies are already debuffed, allowing it to pull double duty as an opener or a finisher depending on your squad makeup and when your Viking goes. This is a really nice mixed ability that, again, can make a mono class unit like a all Vikings squad very powerful, or just a Viking potentially able to deal a lot of extra damage or debuff for allies. It's very awesome. However, the real cream of the crop here is Warhorn. This is your start of battle skill. It costs 2 passive points, and it makes all ally attack skills unguardable. In a physical attacking squad where your Viking should be anyway, this can be a devastating buff for your team, allowing you to carve through guard-reliant enemies like cavalry, fighters, and hoplites with ease that you would really not expect until you see it in action. You combine that with an accuracy boosting skill, and this will allow you to handle both dodge tanks and guard tanks with really only 1 class, which is really quite nasty. The Valor skill becomes Vitalize 2, restoring 2 stamina to all allies in an area, which is insanely valuable as a utility piece. Like, cumulatively, that's potentially plus 20 stamina for your entire army, spread out across all of your units, but still, like, That's a lot of extra battles that you can get in just for using a couple Valor points on this. Vikings are awesome. I really think that the people who undersell them severely, although it seems like the majority of people understand that they are actually quite powerful, which makes me happy because I think they're super cool. Now, less super cool, and I've gotten some flack for this one, but I'm going to stick by it, Swordmasters. These are the promotion of Sword Fighter, doubling down on high risk, high reward damage. They get an extra sword slot on promo, but it's important to note that you don't actually get increased damage from the second sword slot. You only get bonus effects like new skills, extra crit rate, active points, etc., which is still really strong, don't get me wrong, but I really thought that when we got that second sword on promotion, that it was going to be the damage boost that my Swordmasters needed to punch through tankier targets. Not the case, which is balanced, but unfortunate, I would say. They get new skills Meteor Slash and Charged Impetus coming in at 20 and 25. Meteor Slash is a single target damage nuke, 20 potency per hit, but with a whopping 9 hits and a plus 30% crit rate for 2 AP. This is a skill that wants support desperately to help its low damage. But any buffs to damage for your Swordmaster, any buffs to their crit rate, or any nerfs to enemy defense, such as something like, say, Viking that can make attacks unguardable, or other skills that can reduce defense, again, like Viking, will make Meteor Slash very deadly very quickly. It needs a lot of support to start doing the damage that you want it to deal. Charged Impetus is a very interesting one. It is a self-buff after using an active skill, which grants the user plus 1 AP and plus 50% crit damage, which is very interesting. Combine this with something like Meteor Slash, and you're going to be in a pretty nice position, though it does cost 2 passive points. You can open with Keen Edge or Impale, then use Charged Impetus, and then swing with a big Meteor Slash if you really want to maximize your damage and your crit damage. Squishy targets will get just annihilated, just blended by this combo. But again, harder targets are going to need to be debuffed, or again, your Swordmaster is going to need a damage buff to get the most out of this combo of abilities, which is why I start to feel a little down on them. They require a lot of investment in a moment-to-moment basis to really hit their damage potential. Swordmaster really does lean into the strong butt category that Swordfighter falls into as well. They need a lot of support to be good, but once they have it, they tear. Their Valor skill becomes Quick Impetus 2, increasing the size of the sigil that they get as a Sword Fighter, which boosts the initiative of all allies within it. Next, for sword-wielding units, we have my personal favorite class in the game, the Lance Connect. And again, I know, not quite pronouncing it properly, but I've been informed that there's really no way to pronounce it properly if you are proficient in English and not in German, so I'm doing my best over here, I promise. This is, of course, the promotion of Sellsword, and is another huge growth point akin to High Lord for their class. Lance Connects gain a shield on promotion, helping massively with survivability alongside their now absolutely massive HP pool. Lance Connects actually get 3 new skills after promoting, our first instance of such a thing with our promoted classes, as well as hugely boosted stats. Those skills are Bastard's Cross, which we previously mentioned at level 20, Vengeful Guard at level 25, and Bull Force at 30. Bastard's Cross. This is a devastatingly powerful single target attack. It is 70 physical potency per hit with 2 hits. However, the potency of the attack increases based on the target's HP up to plus 60 per hit. This means that as you progress through the game, this attack will scale with enemies' HP across the board, making it always very, very strong. This is going to be one of the most reliable single target attacks in the game for you, for the entire game, I promise you. Then we get Vengeful Guard, activates before being hit by a physical attack, costs 1 passive point, and blocks an attack with a medium guard. It also grants the user plus 20% attack, which can stack. Obviously, this synergizes very well with the Lance Connect's whole kit, especially Bastard's Cross, if you're able to tank a couple of big hits, and then come in swinging with an even more disgustingly powerful attack. Finally, we get Bull Force. This activates after using an active skill. It grants plus 1 AP, plus 20% physical attack, plus 20 initiative, costs 2 passive points, and is similar to the Swordmaster's Charged Impetus. It allows the Lance Connect to deal more and more damage over the course of the battle, and again, if you consider stacking with things like Vengeful Guard, then popping a big Bastard's Cross, or even just using the damage boost to have even stronger following slashes, things like that, you can see why this gets really gross really, really quickly. Really though, like all of these skills combined with the following slash spam from the sellsword days means that Lance Connects are going to deal absolutely devastating, crushing amounts of damage. I haven't crunched all the numbers super specifically, but I really would not be surprised to find that Lance Connects reside in the upper echelon of just raw damage output. If they're not at the very top, they're very close to it. Combine that with the utility of getting a shield and the effects that you can put on them from that, and it does make the class far more durable, but they do still want some support to protect them from afflictions and the like, which will just completely shut them down. They're also still not great against magic either, so like, they're not busted, but they're really, really strong. Finally, their Valor skill updates to include summon archers, a very nice utility piece that gives a free blocker and assist attacker that will actually patrol around the units that summon them, so you'll always have that assist attacker on hand, and with a little bit of clever positioning, you can kind of throw these extra green units into the enemy if you need to buy a little time, or just deal some damage, what have you. Next, we're moving from damage dealers to tanks with the Legionnaire. This is the promotion of Hoplite, and is primarily focused, even more, on adapting the class to larger squad-based combat and tanking, unsurprisingly. They do gain an accessory slot on promotion, and they also, like the Lance Connect, get 3 new skills on promo: Row Cover, Row Protection, and Great Shield at 20, 25, and 30, respectively. Row Cover activates before an ally is attacked, costs 2 passive points, covers a row of allies with a medium guard, and is generally useful for protecting against the AoE attacks that become very common in the mid to late game. This is really just a necessary upgrade from the basic cover attack that Hoplites already come in with, just to accommodate for the fact that, yeah, there's going to be a lot more AoE attacks from here. Then we have Row Protection, coming in at 1 AP, grants allies in the user's row plus 50% physical defense. This is a very nice way to harden the Legionnaire and other frontline allies against pretty much whatever physical attacks come their way, regardless of target. If you have a bunch of frontline tanks, then this is going to make them very hard to bring down, and it can make other allies that aren't as tanky, like your Lance Connects, your Vikings, different things like that, able to survive a lot more punishment than you would initially give them credit for. Finally, we have Great Shield, coming in at 1 AP. This grants the user plus 50% physical defense and 2 passive points. Really, if you want your Legionnaires to do nothing but cover everyone and everything in your squad, this is the way to do it. Of course, you do want it to activate early before you start taking hits, so an initiative boosting tactic or item is definitely something you would want to consider here if you're going to be using Great Shield, but it is worth it because it makes the Legionnaire and their team nearly impervious to physical attacks. Their Valor skill changes to Fortress 2, negating stage damage suffered by all allies in an area for 20 seconds. This is great for covering everyone from Catapult and Ballista Fire, although it is pretty limited, and you're only going to use this a few times over the course of the game, I would imagine. And even then, you can use Giant's Canopies, the consumable, so might want to save your Valor points for other stuff unless you're really in a sticky situation. But if you are, it will come in really handy. Really, at the end of the game, Legionnaires do much the same as their Hoplite brothers. They tank physical attacks, and they tank them well. They have the same weaknesses at the start of the game, hammers, magic, etc. But you do have many more ways to protect them from these weaknesses by the time you're using Legionnaires, which does definitely help them significantly, and I do think makes them better than Hoplites because of that added support. Next, my boys. Bruno's boys, the big men themselves, Berserkers, here we go. One of my absolute favorite classes in the game, and one of the classes that seems like so many people want to fight me over because they talk about just how bad it is. But like, man, I don't know. I think Berserkers need way less investment to be good than Swordmasters at the very least, and they do have similar crazy damage output in a lot of ways, but Berserkers get AoE, and they can also HP tank, so like I kind of like them a lot more. Maybe it's personal preference, I don't know, but I think they're pretty good. So what are they? Berserkers are the promotion for Gladiators, of course, and similar to Legionnaires, focused on adapting the class to deal with larger squads for the most part. They gain an accessory slot on promotion, and they also get 3 new skills on promotion: Mounting Charge, Berserk, Notch, and Grand Smash, the big one, at 20, 25, and 30, respectively. First off, Mounting Charge gives 1 AP, restores 30% of HP to the user, and grants the user plus 30% attack. Situationally useful, as together with Bulk Up can keep the Berserker alive through the initial round of attacks from fast enemies while boosting their own damage. However, as an active skill, it does delay any of your actual attacks by a full round of combat, So you do need to be able to build around that. If you're worried that your Berserker is going to not survive that first round of combat, that buff isn't going to really help you out. But if they are, now you've got some good damage on your hands. Speaking of surviving combat, we have Berserk. This is one passive point, activates before attacking with an active skill, consumes all of your passive points to grant you +1 AP, and gives you the ability to survive one lethal blow. This one is interesting, as it does, as mentioned, allow you to go for one last big swing through something that otherwise would have killed your Berserker. I like to use this on my last point of passive points when bulk up would be enough to tank through the remaining damage on the enemy team, kind of as a Hail Mary. Like, if you get down to this point, you're probably in a desperation situation. You generally don't want to get to this point, but if you do, having Berserk in your back pocket as a way to survive and then come out swinging with what will hopefully finish off the enemy squad, that's not nothing. It's a desperation play, but I mean, what do you think Berserkers rely on, right? Finally, we have Grand Smash. What are you going to want to cast after you're down to your last hit point and you've used Berserk? Obviously, it's Grand Smash. This is an attack with 100 physical potency. It only deals one hit with an 80% hit rate. However, it is ranged, and it is ground-based, so it's not going to hit flyers. However, it attacks all enemies. It gets plus 50 potency if the user is at 100% HP, and it costs 2 active points. This is the piece de resistance for the Berserker. This one is fun. Even if you don't get that plus 50 potency from being at full HP, Berserkers have such naturally massive attack before you consider any other buffs that they get from items, allies, or their own skills with things like Mounting Charge, that this attack will crush. It is a hugely damaging attack, and any sort of buff on the Berserker, guaranteed hits, crits, damage buffs like I previously mentioned, etc., will make it even more disgusting. Especially guaranteed hits and crits. Like, that is so gross. If you have this set to activate after you get an attack buff for Mounting Charge, you can easily clear an entire enemy squad, and it is pretty easy to get your accuracy buffed, even just through accessories, with things like glasses. So, like, you might not even necessarily need that guaranteed hit unless you're fighting enemies that have, like, direct evade skills. And yeah, I hear you. Not being able to hit flyers is a shame, but everything's got to have a weakness, right? Let's be honest. Unless you're granting true hit to your Berserker, you probably weren't hitting flyers anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Their Valor skill becomes Toughness 2, negating stamina loss and knocking back enemies for 2 battles. This can be quite nice. Just being able to say, no, I actually have more stamina than you thought I did, and also I'm going to shove you around the map with my sheer body weight, that can be useful. That can absolutely be very, very useful. Overall, I think Berserkers are great. They can stand on the front line, they can stand on the back line, they can be mixed tanks and damage dealers, they can be raw damage dealers. I love them, man. I think Berserkers are a ton of fun, and I think people are depriving themselves of a very cool tool by not using them. Speaking of big lads, or, well, tiny lasses with big weapons, we have Breakers. This is the promotion from Warrior, and is a very needed one at that. They make for one of the best physical damage dealers in the game, and it is definitely due to the giant meat tenderizer. They gain a second accessory slot on promotion, as well as 3 new skills: Enrage, Heavy Counter, and Row Smash, coming in at 20, 25, and 30. Enrage is really gross. It costs 1 passive point, activates after an ally is hit by an attack, any ally, it does not matter, and it grants the user plus 20% attack and 20 accuracy, and that does stack. As you can probably imagine, this one is pretty wild, since it does trigger whenever any ally is hit by any attacks. In any sort of engagement where your Breaker is slower than the enemy, you will have a boost of anywhere from 20 to 80% attack and accuracy before they ever start attacking. That gets so nasty so fast, and it opens up a lot of potential for not needing any other major buffs on your Breaker. Maybe you want something that's going to give them True Strike. That's it. That is all they're going to need. Then, of course, we have Heavy Counter. This activates after an enemy attacks with an active skill, is 150 physical potency, unguardable, and 1 passive point. You counterattack a single enemy, you ignore 100% of the defense of armored enemies, And if you want to go for more of a counter build, this is going to be your choice, obviously. It does conflict a bit with Enrage, seeing as how they compete for the same passive point resource, but it is certainly a good option if you want to lean into it. I haven't done this myself yet, but I can imagine there being a really fun heavy counter build going on that kind of works similarly to my Super Tax Bros squad that I have, where you have like one tanky enemy up front and a bunch of sellswords in the back that are doing following slashes. Imagine that, but with heavy counters. Like, yeah, you're not going to get the passive points back, but it's more damage, it's unguardable, and it's going to pierce armored enemies. Like, there's something there, man. There is absolutely something there. Finally, we get Row Smash. This has a physical potency of 100, hit count of 1, and attacks a row of enemies, again, ignoring 100% of the defense of armored targets for 2 AP. This is the big one, where you crush half the enemy squad, if not more, after you enrage 1 to 4 times with one big attack. Like, it's simple, it is extremely effective, and there's really not much else to say about it. It's just really strong. Like, getting that big 1 to 4 count in rage, and then just crushing an entire row of enemies like it's nothing, was pure dopamine injected directly into my cerebellum as soon as I first saw it. It is so much fun. Highly recommend trying this out with a breaker if you have not already. Finally, their Valor skill is upgraded to Heavy Swing 2, dealing damage and destroying barricades in a larger area than the base Heavy Swing 1. And all told, like, man, I was really down on Warriors as, like, the base promotion of just Warrior. They have their uses, don't get me wrong, but, like, I was not super high on them. They just didn't have a lot that they were doing. Then you promote to Breaker, and suddenly the kid gloves come off, and they become, again, I don't have the exact numbers, but definitely one of the best, if not the best, damage dealers, or potentially one of the best damage dealers in the game, at the very least among the generic classes. Next up, we have Sniper, the promotion of Hunter, which is focused on making a stronger AoE fighter. The class gets a second accessory slot on promotion and 2 new skills on promotion, Row Shot and Aerial Snipe, at 20 and 25 respectively. Row Shot has 100 physical potency, is ranged, attacks a row of enemies, and all of this for 2 AP. It's exactly like it says on the tin, isn't it? AoE damage at range, using Eagle Eye, pop rows of fires and angels, deal good damage to backline mages, burn down rogues and sword masters. It's all pretty good stuff, really. Aerial Snipe is a little bit different, though. Physical potency of 50, activates after an ally is hit by an attack, counterattack a single enemy with plus 100 potency against flying enemies for 1 passive point. This is similarly simple. A nice little counterattack that deals bonus damage to flying units, and it rounds out the sniper's skill set as a good damage dealer and flyer killer. Simple, but effective. Their Valor skill changes to Arrow Rain 2, dealing damage in a wider area than the base skill. And all of this comes together to make a very solid ranged physical damage dealing class. Doesn't do anything fancy, really no crazy combo potential or anything like that with the base kit. It's just, you want to be able to snipe stuff? Well, you're going to be able to do it. Want to be able to guarantee that you're going to hit stuff? Absolutely. Deal damage to groups of enemies? You got it. It can do all of that and not a whole lot more. But sometimes there is beauty in the simplicity. Moving on to Shield Shooter. This is the promotion for Arbalist, another quite dramatic shift for the class, if we're being perfectly honest. The addition of a Great Shield changes quite a bit for the way you're going to use these shooters, making for a mixed tank and damage dealer that's very interesting. Notably, they also do lose 20 mobility in this change, dropping from 100 to 80, which is not the biggest deal, but something you may want to consider regardless. They get 2 new skills, Heavy Bolt and Aid Cover, at 20 and 25 respectively. Heavy Bolt is a 100 physical potency ranged single target attack, which gets plus 100 potency, literally double the damage, if the user is in the front row for 2 AP. If it wasn't obvious from the addition of the Great Shield, shield shooters really want to be tanking on the front line. Heavy Bolt plays into that by being on one of the single highest damage single target attacks in the game, and being ranged makes it very easy to annihilate delicate backliners with it. Then you get Aid Cover, activates before an ally is attacked. You cover an ally with a medium guard, restoring 25% HP to that ally for 1 passive point. Again, if it wasn't obvious by this point, this is your second hint that this is now a frontline class. Aid Cover is a nice little piece that not only covers, but heals the target, which is pretty unique when it comes down to different ways to cover for allies. While the shield shooter isn't as durable as a legionnaire, the added utility of a healing guard along with medical aid, toxic bolt, heavy bolt, etc. makes this a very versatile and very useful class. Being able to heal, guard, deal good damage, poison, you kind of have it all, and that makes it very easy to slap this character into pretty much any unit that you want. Speaking of slapping, slap the Mirage Shield on to make a proper dodge tank, and you have a recipe for success where you don't even need to worry about that durability any longer. Your Valor skill becomes Smoke Bolt 2, preventing all enemy assist units in range from using assist attacks for 20 seconds, which is insanely useful for clumps of enemy watchtowers or assist reinforcements, things like that. It's a pretty large area, bigger than you might expect, and you're going to be able to cut off a good amount of enemy assists with this. I love shield shooters. I think that they are probably one of the better classes in the game just for their sheer versatility. They can fill so many different slots in your squads that you can then use other different types of units that are maybe a little bit more focused while you let your shield shooter do a lot of the backline heavy lifting or frontline tanking, depending on what it is that you want to do with them. It's great. Next up, we have Rogues. This is, of course, the promotion of Thieves, adding even more utility to the class. They gain another accessory slot on promotion, as well as 3 new skills: Shadow Bite, Sneaking Edge, and Active Steal at 20, 25, and 30. Shadow Bite has a physical potency of 15, hit count of 2, it is ranged, you attack a row of enemies with it, it inflicts blindness, initiative minus 20, and evasion minus 20. Holy crap, that's more than I was even realizing, for 2 AP. This, obviously, for just all the various different effects that it has, is a very powerful disruption tool, and the fact that it's ranged allows you to disable the enemy backline with it as well. Not a bad choice, either in conjunction with Passive Steal and Toxic Throw, or even just on its own. Sneaking Edge is a physical potency 50 attack, hit count of 2, also ranged, uncoverable, notably, limited start of battle ability. Kind of winds up being a little detrimental because of that, but it allows you to attack a single enemy with a first strike, inflicting Guard Seal and Passive Seal for 1 passive point. This one is odd. As far as start of battle skills go, it is fairly limited, targeting 1 enemy with an effect that is fine. It's fine. Really, the only use I like for this is to prevent a cleric or other support unit like a druid from using their support skills, which is certainly not bad. And if that would counter your squad, it's definitely useful, but it's very, very, very situational. You could also potentially use this to keep a heavy tanky unit like a legionnaire from guarding. But, I mean, if I'm going to be fighting an armored unit, I'm probably attacking it with a squad that can just blow up the armored unit anyway, so not super useful for me. Active Steal. This one is awkward. Before I give you the description for it, you should know this skill is either bugged or, more likely, the description is just mistranslated. Either way, it says that the ability steals all of the target's AP in the same way that Passive Steal steals all of the target's PP, but it does not. It only steals 1, and only 1, active point, so keep that in mind if you plan to use it. With that said, here's the effect as it's stated in the game. Physical potency of 25, hit rate 4, attack a single enemy, steal quote-unquote all of the enemy's AP, does not apply if they guard the first hit, for AP of 2. So, again, the skill says it steals all AP, but in actuality and in testing, it only steals 1. You can test this for yourself. If I'm able to, I'll toss some footage of that up on screen here. I have tested this, but I don't know if I have the footage readily on hand. With that in mind, it's still not terrible, honestly. You can very easily disrupt an enemy's skill setup by draining even just a single active point from them, which essentially makes Active Steal only cost 1, allowing you to use more skills, and the damage can be decent against squishy targets. It's really not a bad skill, but it's not how I've chosen to use my rogues. Do with that how you will. And again, it goes from seeming so devastatingly powerful because you can just prevent an enemy from using any of their active skills, which would probably just be busted, but to just being like, okay, well, I can slow him down a little bit, I guess. Again, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's just underwhelming compared to the actual in-game description. Also, your Valor skill becomes Plunder 2, which gives the insane effect of making Plunder AoE, stealing gold from every enemy squad in range. This is a beast of a moneymaker for only 1 Valor point. I recommend it very, very heavily. Rogues are definitely an interesting beast. In the early game, as one of the only super reliable evade tanks, Thieves are awesome. They are able to get you through so much and avoid so much damage by just spamming evade everywhere, by stealing passive points and just dodging all over the place. Later in the game, though, as a lot more true strike attacks come online and there's far more enemies in any given squad, it becomes a lot harder for your Thief and then your Rogue to be able to just keep up with the sheer amount of attacks coming their way, especially if you have any sort of enemy that is going to be using an attack that has multiple hits, because that'll burn through your evasion like it's nothing. So while they can still be functional, I do prefer other options when it comes to evade tanks, or I prefer to just tank outright. So for me, Rogues tend to shift to a bit more of a support role, which is fully supported by what they have for their skills. Sneaking Edge, Active Steal, Shadow Bite, Venom Toss, or Poison Toss, or whatever. Like, they can do plenty chilling on the back line, disrupting, disabling enemies. Like, they are more than capable in that role, but it is definitely a role shift that I think needs to happen for them to reach their full potential. Then you can do things like tossing extra support items on them to make use of their extra passive points they get from passive steal, and they're still very nice, don't get me wrong, but they don't quite wind up being the best evade tanks in the game after a little while. Next, we're leaving the realm of infantry and moving into the realm of cavalry with the Great Knight. This is, of course, the promotion of regular knights, and you gain an accessory slot on promotion. If you know what a knight does, you know what a Great Knight does. These mounted warriors are absolute terrors on the battlefield, and their expanded skills give them even more destructive power. Speaking of those skills, there's two of them: Pile Thrust and Knight's Pursuit at 20 and 25 respectively. Pile Thrust has a physical potency of 50, a hit count of 3, attacks a single target with multiple hits, grants the user +1 AP if the target is defeated. This is the natural evolution of Assaulting Lance, and Pile Thrust is a devastatingly powerful single target damage dealer. There's a good chance that whatever you target with this will explode and grant you your AP back. The biggest issue is that, unlike Assaulting Lance, Pile Thrust doesn't infinitely fuel itself, but its ability to just nuke something and open up the enemy unit for Assaulting Lance loops can't be overstated, especially if you're getting the bonus potency from attacking an infantry target. Next up is Knight's Pursuit, a 1 passive point follow-up attack that targets a column of enemies. Great Knights getting a pursuit skill that hits a row of enemies makes them even more disgusting in terms of damage. Like, it's one thing to have a following slash to slap an enemy that, you know, dared to attack you. Like, yeah, that's good. But slapping a target and then also his buddy behind him, now that's just rude. And we do love rude around here when it comes to combat effectiveness against our enemies. Really, Great Knights aren't fancy compared to other promotions, but that's honestly fine, as Knights and Great Knights are some of the best in the business when it comes to raw damage output and power. All they needed was the chance to better deal with larger squads and deal more damage in the process, and Great Knight gets that, and they do it well. Now we have Sainted Knight. We're moving from damage to support here, and God, I love it. This is, of course, the promotion of Radiant Knight, gains an accessory slot on promotion. And similar to Great Knights, Sainted Knight does basically just more of the same that its base class does, healing, protecting, and dealing damage even more than it did before. You get 2 new skills on promotion, Row Barrier and Saint's Blade at 20 and 25. Row Barrier costs 2 passive points, activates before an ally is hit by a magic attack, negates the next magic damage dealt to a row of allies, negates afflictions for the same. This is a very efficient skill. While it does cost 2 passive points, protecting an entire row of allies from magic damage and afflictions is very strong, should not be underestimated, and really is pretty efficient when you think about it. Like, you're covering potentially 3 characters for 2 passive points. You're essentially getting a free passive point in there for the effect, which is awesome. Then we have Saint's Blade, and this, it's not like the single most powerful skill in the game, but it's pretty ridiculous for one reason that we'll get into. It's 50 physical potency with 2 hits, 1 AP, single target, plus 25 potency if the user is at 100% HP, and grants the user +1 passive point if the attack hits. This, if you weren't paying attention, is the upgraded version of the Hacha skill. But insanely, unlike all of the other skills in the game that tend to cost 1 more AP than its base version, but then gives you extra effects, you get the extra effects and the extra damage, but it still only costs 1 AP. It costs the same as Hacha, while dealing more damage and hitting more times. There is literally 0 reason that I can come up with, unless for some reason you don't want your Sainted Knight to potentially kill something, which I don't know why that would be the case, but there's really no reason not to use this skill over Hacha. It's honestly a very solidly damaging ability. It restores your passive points as well as the cherry on top. I think it's maybe our only instance of just straight up 100% power creep of a skill in the game, which is wild. Like, Sainted Knights are already insanely good, and then they just get a completely free upgrade that you have no reason not to use. Like, okay, cool. You know what? Sounds good to me, man. I'll take it. Rounding out our cavalry, we have the Doom Knight. This is, of course, the promotion of Dark Knight, and you gain an accessory slot on promotion. Unlike its fellow cavalry, the transition to Doom Knight is actually a very dramatic one for the class. It's, again, joining things like Warrior to Breaker and Arbalist to Shield Shooter. Like, this is a very dramatic improvement that really brings the whole class together. You get a big boost to your stats and extra synergistic skills that are vital for the class, and that takes them from fine to great. Those two skills are as follows: Dark Flame and Demonic Pact at 20 and 25. Dark Flame boasts a physical potency of 50 and a magical potency of 50. This is a dual damage type attack for 2 AP, and it is a row attack. It consumes 30% of your HP to use, gets plus 50 potency against debuffed targets, and inflicts burn. This is an incredibly nasty skill in the Doom Knight's arsenal. Not only is it very efficient, hitting up to 3 enemies for 2 AP, similar to the 3 allies, 2 passive point block that the Sainted Knight has, which we talked about, but it does deal mixed damage, as we mentioned, to handle all types of enemies. It burns enemies, meaning you're going to be getting even more free damage in. It gets a damage bonus if there's already debuffs going around, and best of all, it drains the Doom Knight's HP to synergize with their other skills that want your HP to be lower. It is the missing piece that brings the whole class together, and it makes Doom Knights a terror to deal with. Then we get to Demonic Pact, and this is also a very, very cool one. It activates after you use an active skill, costs 1 passive point, sacrifices 25% of your HP to grant the user plus 1 AP. Much like Dark Flame, this is a self-synergy piece that really brings the Doom Knights kit together. If Magic the Gathering has taught me anything, when you can make a cost to activate an effect into a benefit for you on top of the effect of the skill, you're laughing your way to the bank. Buffing your own damage with Vengeful Axe while also giving you extra AP to use it or other attacks is insanely strong, and it makes Demonic Pact a just incredible synergy piece for Doom Knights. The Valor skill also becomes Attack Call 2, affecting a larger area. And really, I mean, I love Doom Knights, man. It's so satisfying to see a class come into its own so well on promotion, and it makes for a truly unique cavalry damage dealer. Like, they had this awkward prepubescent phase. Like, Dark Knights were cool. Like, I liked them, you know, muscular dudes on horses with axes that do, like, poison and draining and different stuff like that. Like, that's great, cool. But, like, Doom Knight is where it's at, man. Doom Knight is tight. Love it. Very cool stuff. But now we have to move back to the infantry, talking about bishops. This is, of course, the promotion of Cleric, and you gain an accessory slot on promotion. Clerics were already one of the best starting classes in Unicorn Overlord, and Bishop does give them even more tools to play with, which is nice. You get 2 new skills, Parting Resurrection and Sacred Heal at 20 and 25. Parting Resurrection activates at the end of a battle, is 1 passive point to use, and revives 1 ally, restoring them to 1 HP. This is a very simple res, more than welcome. You know, not a ton of them in the game. Comes in at a cheap 1 passive point, which is very easy to have available at the end of a fight. Gets a character up even at 1 HP, which can be huge. This can enable item healing, valor healing, just makes them an extra meat shield. Potentially, if they have very high initiative, it'll let them get their attacks out anyway, even though they're on death's door. Or a self-healing class gives them a chance to heal at the next encounter. It's really not a bad piece. It gives you a lot of versatility, even if you would expect, like, at least giving 25% HP. No. You get 1. Do with that what you will. Then, of course, they get Sacred Heal. This restores moderate HP to a row of allies, removes all debuffs, which is nice, and costs 2 active points. And really, I mean, it's pretty simple, right? A row heal that not only heals, but removes debuffs, 2 AP. That's efficient. It definitely gets the job done. Sign me up. Don't need any weird conditions or anything. Just pop it and go, which is nice. Finally, their Valor skill becomes Heal 2, restoring 50% HP to all allies in a big area, which is very, very strong. Like, that really cannot be overstated. That is a ton of healing, especially if you get all of your units grouped together. You're given, what, 50 characters, a 50% health boost? Like, okay, yeah, that's pretty good. It's pretty efficient, you know, not bad at all. Really, bishops are quite nice. They aren't quite as busted as clerics are contextually, given when you're going to be using them, just because you do have other good support options, and there's other slightly more involved things that can do a lot of work for you. But I mean, doesn't make bishop bad in any way. They enable just an insane amount of durability and survivability that can keep, in a lot of cases, even the frailest of squads going for a good long while, which is nice. Then we get Warlocks. This is, of course, the promotion for Wizard. Gains a 3rd accessory slot on promotion. And this promotion is essentially just an upkeep promotion, similar to things like Great Knight, making sure that Wizard can keep doing its job against larger enemy units. And to do that, you get 3 skills on promo: Thunderous Strike, Concentrate, and Volcano at 20, 25, and 30. Thunderous Strike has a magical potency of 200, the big 200. Hey everyone, Future Tom here, just in the editing process, and I don't know why I said Thunderous Strike deals 200 magical potency. It's 100, clearly. I don't know where I got 200 from. I probably just mistyped it in my notes, and then, because I have no experience with Warlocks, just assumed that was right. So, yeah. I'm going to say 200 a couple of times through here. Don't mind that. It's 100. I'm dumb. Forgive me. Okay, moving on. Costs 2 active points, only has a 90% hit rate, which isn't terrible, but still worth considering. It is, of course, ranged, and it attacks a row of enemies with magic. Also, inflicts stun, which is quite nice. A stun option that deals really high damage is a very nice utility option for the otherwise raw damage Warlock, expanding their options for unit inclusion, making it a little bit easier to slot them in different places if you need them to be able to do stuff other than just deal damage. And even then, it does deal a lot of damage as well, so definitely a very solid option. Then we have Concentrate, activates after using an active skill, costs 2 passive points, grants the user +1 active point and +40 accuracy. And this is an odd one. Getting an extra AP is certainly very good, and the accuracy isn't anything to sneeze at, but man, I don't know. Both of those are very easily remedied with the 3 accessory slots that Warlocks have, leaving you to deal more damage via magic counter or pursuit. Just different things that are going to use your passive points in a more direct way. Like, if you have something sneaky that you're trying to do with this, cool. By all means, go for it. And yeah, if you already have accessories on that boost your AP to 4 and then you're using Concentrate to get even more AP, yeah, go nuts. Don't get me wrong. That's definitely fine. But that feels like overkill at that point. If by the time you're done, you've got your Warlock using like 6 AP, the enemy unit should probably be dead or very close to dead. Or your Warlock's going to die before they even get the chance to use all those. So, like, I don't know. It feels kind of like a win-more situation, to borrow another idea from Magic the Gathering. Good when it's good, but most of the time I think you don't really need it. Then, of course, we have Volcano. Magical potency of 150, hit rate of 90% once again, ranged. Attacks a column of enemies and inflicts burn. Essentially the AoE version of Fireball, which is certainly a welcome option. Dealing big damage and burning is the trademark of the class, so having an AoE option to do that is vital, especially if you're using something like the Chlorotic Rod still, so you have more options for enemies to still be burning at the end of a fight, and give you better targets to target with the Chlorotic Rod and just blow everybody up. Like, very nice stuff, don't get me wrong. Finally, their Valor skill becomes Blaze 2, dealing AoE damage in an even larger area than before. You might notice as well, I don't really have footage of Warlock because I have never actually used a Warlock. I mentioned this during my tier list as well, but yeah, I can't really speak to them. They certainly seem good when I'm fighting them. Like, I'm never particularly scared of them, but the damage output can be really strong. But since in the campaign that I've finished thus far, never used them, so it's hard for me to give an opinion, but I mean, more damage is good, especially when it's magic damage, so there's nothing wrong with the class in particular. Now, talking about something I have used fairly extensively, we do have the Sorceress. This is the promotion for the Witch, also gains a 3rd accessory slot on promotion. This promotion expands on both the offense and support capabilities of the base Witch class to really great effect, while also allowing for some fun combo options, and you get 2 skills on promotion. Quick Cast and Ice Coffin at 25 and 30. Quick Cast activates at the start of a battle, costs 2 passive points, grants the user max initiative for their next action and minus 50% critical rate. This is a very nice utility or combo piece, as it allows you to potentially nuke or freeze priority targets before they can act. With charged skills like Trinity Rain, you can get those going right off the bat and then potentially use other effects to be able to then immediately take another action and bomb the entire enemy team, which is very, very fun. We've seen that in action plenty of times with my squads, but at the same time, taking up your start of battle slot is rough. Remember, you can only have one of those activate at the start of a fight, so you do want to plan around this. If you're going to be using Quick Cast, whatever you're doing with it needs to be strong to make up for the fact that you're losing out on your other start of battle abilities. Then we get Ice Coffin, magic potency of 100, row attack, ranged, 2 active points, and inflicts freeze while dealing plus 50% damage against frozen targets. Unsurprisingly, having AoE freeze is no joke. If you're someone who has been using the Ice Conferral Tome from basically the very beginning of the game to give your Griffins or your Berserkers an AoE freeze attack, like, you know how strong this can be. And not just being able to do it by yourself, target the backline, deal a bunch of damage in the process, yeah, that's nice. The fact that it can synergize with other sorceresses or anything else that's freezing to be able to deal even more damage while freezing enemies, it's icing on the cake. Like, it didn't need to have that, but I mean, I'm never going to complain about having more damage. It's a very, very nice ability. Finally, they get one evolution of one of their Valor skills to Greater Gravity, tanking enemy move speed by 90% in an even greater area. Sorceresses are awesome. They have very good damage output. They've got great utility, being able to give their allies True Strike, freeze enemies, give themselves the ability to cast an attack at the start of the fight, guaranteed, before anything else can go, and potentially disrupt the enemy. Like, it's all good stuff. Sorceresses are great. I love them. I think they're a phenomenal class, and there's just a ton you can do with them, which is nice. They're very versatile. Then we get Druids. Moving from damage to just raw shutdown control energy. Blue players, eat your heart out. This is, of course, the promotion for Shaman. Also gains a 3rd accessory slot on promotion and gets 3 new skills: Defensive Curse, Cursed Swamp, and Compounding Curse at 20, 25, and 30. Defensive Curse, this is another mistranslated skill, FYI. It describes the skill as impacting a foe's attack stats. What it actually affects, as the name might imply, is their defensive stats. The correct text is what I describe here. 1 AP, ranged, inflicts physical defense and magical defense minus 50%, as well as guard seal on a row of enemies. You can see that this is actually the effect that pops up if you use this in battle. When you target a group of enemies with it, you'll see physical defense down, magical defense down. So that's how this works. For any confusion, I wanted to point it out that this is another mistranslated skill. And for what it's worth, it is a very nice piece, absolutely. It's a welcome piece to include in any high offense squad to make them be able to deal even more damage. It's a very, very nice piece to have in your arsenal. Then we have Cursed Swamp. This is a ranged, limited start of battle ability that costs 2 passive points and inflicts initiative minus 10 and evasion minus 30 on all enemies, as well as draining a passive point off any cavalry targets. This is a great start of battle piece and one of my personal favorites in the game. Being able to tank an enemy team's initiative so you can blitz them potentially with your entire squad's worth of first attacks, unless you got something truly devastatingly slow, that's great. That is absolutely awesome. And making enemies even less dodgy so you can punish them with big attacks is equally strong. It gets hard counters by healers such as clerics that can remove the debuffs quickly, but even then, you just burn some of their passive points, so like it's still all around a win. And it enables some truly nutty stuff, like having a druid in my Bruno squad so that he had no issues hitting everything with his Grand Slam was hysterically awesome. And it made it so that he was moving before most enemies as well. So like there's a lot that you can do with Cursed Swamp. Even if they do have something that's going to start removing the debuffs, it's still really, really nice. I love it. Then we get Compounding Curse, and we're going from the glorious highs of 2 other skills to a terrible low here with this one, but I mean, Druids are already insanely strong. They didn't need a level 30 skill, so it's not a huge deal. This one costs 1 active point, it is ranged, and it makes debuffs 1.5 times as effective on a row of enemies. I'm just going to come right out and say this is probably the worst ability in the game. Taking one of your actions to make debuffs more powerful when there's only, 3-4 rounds of combat in most fights is a huge waste of time when you could just be spending more time debuffing the enemy. Like, it could have nice uses, but the vast majority of the time, just casting more debuffs will be far more useful than making the few you do use marginally stronger, right? Like, I would rather get the debuffs flowing early so that I can make it so that the enemies are dealing less damage for my team, make it so that my team's first round of attacks deal more damage to the enemy, things like that. Like, I can't really imagine a situation where I'm going to be relying on a druid to so severely nerf a particular stat on a group of enemies that I'm willing to essentially use 2 actions just to make that happen. Like, it just doesn't feel worth it. You know, maybe there's some crazy combos out there that y'all have using Compounding Curse to just really hammer something into the ground with debuffs. By all means, if you do, let me know in the comments, but I've not seen a single use case for this yet where I'm happy to be spending my time doing this when I could just be spending my time throwing more curses around. That just feels way better. But again, I mean, even if this is an absolute garbage ability that no one is ever going to want to use, except for weird niche cases that aren't really super relevant to begin with, the whole rest of the Druid's kit is already phenomenal. So, like, they get a pass here. It's fine. Finally, their Valor skill becomes Clairvoyance 2, increasing the duration of the effect from 30 to 60 seconds, which is, you know, not nothing. It's not the most useful skill around, but hey, having it last twice as long is certainly nice. Overall, Druids are phenomenal. They're probably my favorite support unit in the game, just because they are able to do so much for you so quickly by just cutting the legs out from under the enemy. It's awesome. They've got a ton of really cool effects, and as a result, they can fit into pretty much any unit that you want them in, which is very, very nice. Wyvern Master. We've got our flyers coming in here now, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. This is the promotion for Wyvern Knight, unsurprisingly. Gains a 3rd accessory slot and 3 skills on promotion, which add a lot of utility to the class, rounding out its powerful damaging abilities from its base class. You get Fire Breath, Dragon's Roar, and Tempest Drive at 20, 25, and 30, respectively. Fire Breath is an interesting one. Physical potency of 75, ranged row attack for 2 AP that inflicts burn. While this is not my preferred style of play for Wyverns, some added utility from an Affliction attack that can slot them into that style of squad, never a bad thing. Never hurts to have more options, especially since it's an AoE dot ability. It would have been nice to see this also deal magic damage, similar to the Doom Knight's Dark Flame, but didn't get that. I guess they figured that was one extra tool that a Wyvern didn't already need because they're already really strong, so a little bit of a shame to see, but, I mean, it still gets the job done, right? Then we get Dragon's Roar. This is a start of battle ability, also ranged, limited, 2 passive points. Inflicts initiative -20 on all enemies. This is another nice utility piece. It's not my favorite start of battle ability, but if you're going for a Blitz build or maybe an Affliction build, slowing the enemy down so you can do your thing, either deal a bunch of damage, try and take out as many of them as possible, or get your Afflictions stacked on there before they can take any actions, make sure that you have more time for your burns and your poisons to tick, things like that. Certainly a solid option. Not bad at all. This is great with Fire Breath, so again, you can make it so the enemy can't move, then light them all on fire, so when they do take their turns, they get to burn, which is great. So not a bad piece, just not my preferred playstyle. Then we have Tempest Drive. This is physical potency at 150, ranged, 2 AP. This is a column attack. Cavalry, notably, can't guard against it, and it becomes a True Strike critical if the user is below 50% HP. This is an interesting one, but again, not my favorite. It's a highly damaging attack that can reach the back line. Sure, the anti-cavalry abilities on it, very nice, don't get me wrong. But the biggest part of the skill is the bonus True Strike and Crit if you're low on HP. This is an issue, as there is no way for a Wyvern to guarantee that their HP is low, unlike, again, say, a Doom Knight. This means you are wholly reliant on the enemy hitting you enough to trigger the effect, or like letting your squad get hit by environmental effects that you can't control the targeting of anyway, like enemy ballista fire, catapults. I mean, the catapult is just as likely to completely obliterate your squad to begin with, so you really don't want to mess with that. Or like running into a bunch of assist skills, like weird counterintuitive plays just to get your HP low enough to trigger the bonus effects from this. It's a nice bonus to have when you get it, but you're not living up to your full potential if you can't trigger that. This means that really, like, it just puts you in a weird position where you want to be taking hits, but not so many hits that your Wyvern dies, you know? And then you add in any potential healing on your squad. It can be hard to extract maximum value from this skill, man. This doesn't mean it's awful by any means, but there's just other skills I prefer on the class. Really, it's weird because, like, I like all of the base Wyvern Knight skills way more than I like the promoted Wyvern Lord skills or Wyvern Master skills. Or just putting spears on them that they can use, things like Dragoon Dive, you know? They're really good with that. And again, you can certainly use these skills. Having a Fire Breath Dragon's Roar comp on a Wyvern would absolutely work. Don't get me wrong, it's just not how I use them. But there's some weird stuff here that I can't help but compare them to Doom Knights and the way Doom Knight plays, and it's so synergistic that I wish that Wyverns had a little bit more of that self-synergy going on. But, you know, is what it is. Finally, their Valor skill becomes Dragoon Dive 2, dealing damage in an even larger area than the base version of the skill. Now, we have Griffin Masters, and I mean, Griffin Knights to Wyvern Knights, I think Griffin Knights take it. Griffin Master to Wyvern Master, I think Griffins still take it, man. Griffin Masters are gross. They are, of course, promotion of Griffin Knight, gain a 3rd accessory slot and 3 skills on promotion. Fatal Dive, Griffin Glide, and Aerial Smite at 20, 25, and 30. Fatal Dive is ranged and unguardable for 2 AP. It is also a column attack, and the damage dealt is equal to 50% of the user's HP, and it can't crit. This is a very unique skill in the toolbox of skills in Unicorn Overlord. Unless I'm misremembering, this is in fact the only skill that functions in this way, where it deals a set amount of damage based on a different parameter than, like, your attack stats, right? Looking at your HP and just taking half of that and then dealing that as damage. Like, that's a Pokemon, like, Nightshade, Seismic Toss type of thing. Not used to skills like that in a strategy RPG like this. And I mean, yeah, dealing an amount of damage that's essentially true, i.e. it's not reduced by defensive stats, you know exactly how much damage it does do, can really be useful. Like, that's a very set parameter that you know exactly what it's going to do. But it's also not really the most useful thing, because the majority of the time you're doing more damage with the other skills than the Griffin Master, largely due to the fact that Griffins don't really have the best HP. So, yeah, you could stack a bunch of HP boosting items on your Griffin Master and then deal a ton of damage with Fatal Dive, I guess, which could be cool, could be fun. But I think I'd rather use some of their other skills. I don't know, it's a little bit of an odd piece. Great for piercing armor, absolutely, no doubt about that, but definitely odd. Then we have Griffin Glide. 2 passive points, activates before being hit by a ranged attack, evades a single hit of a ranged attack, grants the user +1 active point. This is an awesome defensive piece for Griffins. They're already quite hard to hit for ground-based melee units, but they are vulnerable to things like archers. Having a skill they can use to evade such attacks while also granting themselves an extra attack is even better. Really, there's no notes other than that. It's just strong. Like, having a built-in way to avoid the biggest natural weakness of a flying unit makes Griffin Master incredibly capable and incredibly self-sufficient, which I do really appreciate. Finally, we have Aerial Smite, and unfortunately, this is yet another mistranslated skill. I don't know why these are all coming in the second half of the list, but yeah, unfortunately, is what it is. In-game, the skill says that it will cost the Griffin Master 1 extra AP if she uses this attack at full HP. This is not the case. What actually happens is the Griffin Master will reduce the AP of any enemy hit who has 100% HP. Very, very different. Here's the full proper effect. 150 physical potency, ranged, row attack for 2 AP. Cavalry can't guard against this attack, inflicts AP -1 if a target is at 100% HP. This one honestly feels kind of broken, which should tell you how strong it is. Being a ranged, high damage row attack has potentially devastating implications for most units. Being able to drain AP off a row of enemies, if you're able to go before they've taken any other hits as well, absolutely brutal, and not that hard to achieve, because Griffins can be made to be quite fast. So you can very easily set it up so that your Griffin is taking the first action and just crushing the biggest row of enemies. This is easily one of the best blitz attacks in the game, and you're likely to see it quite often in the Colosseum as a result. Their Valor skill becomes the insanely busted Hastened Call 2, doubling the move speed of all allies in the area of effect for 30 seconds. This alone makes at least one Griffin Master a must-have in your army, and the rest of their kit makes it an even more sure thing. This is easily one of the best classes in the entire game. And then finally, I'm adding this in the postscript because I totally forgot to script out sections for High Priestess and Valkyria, the promoted classes of Scarlet and Virginia / Queen Elenia. So it's gonna be a little bit more rough and tumble, a little bit more loose, but I wanted to get these in here quick in the tail end of the video because we did cover their base classes in the initial videos. So Scarlet's High Priestess, obviously, the promotion from the base Priestess. And, I mean, it's pretty good. You get an extra accessory slot on promotion, and you get a bunch of new skills: Innocent Ray, Saint's Barrier, and Divine Blessing. We'll go through those in order here. Saint's Barrier activates before an ally is attacked, reduces the damage taken by an ally by 50% for one attack, and also prevents them from being debuffed. This is nice because unlike things that specifically guard against like physical attacks, like a guard skill or a barrier skill that specifically guards against magic, this is just all damage. Reduced damage, period, taken by an ally by 50% for one attack, one passive point. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good. Especially because it prevents them from being, like, debuffed. That's... not going to complain about that. That is a very, very nice skill, especially only coming in at one passive point. Like, you can throw a lot of those around over the course of a fight if you so choose. Very, very nice. Then we get Innocent Ray, 2 active points, 150 magical potency. It is ranged. Attack a row of enemies with magic and remove all the target's buffs. This is also really nice. Like 150 magical potency row attack, that is nothing to sneeze at. That is a very good chunk of damage. And then if there's anything on the enemy team that's relying on any sort of buffs, like say, I don't know, a row of backline breakers that have enraged 2 to 4 times and they're about to start crushing your entire team, just slap them with an Innocent Ray and suddenly they don't have any enraged stacks anymore. It's very nice. I can imagine this being a very powerful attack. Full disclosure, I've not had the chance to really use High Priestess, but it's got good damage. It's got a nice bonus effect. Can't really complain about that. Very solid. Finally, we have Divine Blessing. This is 1 passive point, start of battle, limited effect. Grants all allies HP regeneration and plus 10% defense. 1 passive point. Not terrible. It's a little limited. You know, for a start of battle effect, there are probably other better options, but if you're going to be in a squad that's going to be taking a lot of damage, maybe they're slower, maybe they're tankier, being able to give them HP regeneration so that they can passively heal up over the course of the fight, and then a nice little boost to their defense, I mean, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. You know, if you've got nothing else going on, use this, potentially use it for a tanky squad. I'm not going to complain about it. It's definitely just not the best start of battle skill that I've ever seen. Finally, then, we still have our Valor skills, Regeneration and Resurrection. As far as I'm aware, there's no changes to these compared to the base class of Scarlet. If that is incorrect, let me know in the comments. And overall, I mean, High Priestess seems pretty nice. People have described her as the only red mage in the game, which I think is an accurate statement and appropriate since how she normally wears red and white. Of course, I've switched that up to my channel-branded black and orange, and she looks awesome for it. But yeah, I mean, having some healing, having some allied defense, having some damage, and some ways to remove buffs from enemies, I'm not going to complain about any of that. I'm very excited to use Scarlet in my current True Zenoiran run. I think she's going to be a very solid option, and these skills are going to be fun to use once I get my hands on them. Finally, moving on to Valkyria, Virginia. We know that this is a very strong class. We did use Valkyria a bit during my run, and of course Queen Elenia also uses it. You get a bunch of nice stuff, an accessory slot on promotion, as well as 3 new skills. Iron Veil, Brandish, and Undying Will at 25, 30, and 35 respectively. Iron Veil is a passive skill, 1 passive point, activates at the start of a battle, grants plus 50% guard rate and plus 30% physical defense to all allies. Now this is a start of battle effect. High Priestess, don't get me wrong, like, Divine Blessing is nice because it's just plus 10% defense, period. Both defenses, which is nice. But if you're going to be in a fight with a bunch of physical damage enemies, just having everything on your team get plus 50% guard rate, which is a huge buff, and plus 30% physical defense is essentially going to make your team unkillable. Like, that is so strong. Iron Veil is so cool. Then we get Brandish, 2 active points, physical potency of 50, hit count of 3. This is unguardable and attacks a single enemy, ignoring 50% of the target's defense and granting the user plus 1 passive point if the attack hits. This is what we see Queen Elenia use in the opening cutscene, well, I guess opening battle of the game, the prologue, if you will, Very strong attack. The fact that it's unguardable means you're always getting your damage through. You're going to ignore a chunk of the target's defense. So you're going to be dealing a ton of damage in the process. And you're giving yourself passive points back. Say you used Iron Veil at the start, then you brandish, get that passive point back, have more room for Maiden's Hammer, Undying Will, all that type of good stuff. Very, very solid attack. Then finally we have Undying Will that we just mentioned. 1 passive point, activates before attacking with an active skill. Attack potency increases as HP decreases, maximum of plus 100, and grants the ability to survive 1 lethal blow. So this is really cool. Like, as soon as you've taken any hits, which you are going to as a Valkyria because you're standing on the front line, you then use Undying Will whenever you go in for the attack, say like with Brandish, and now you're dealing even more damage, up to a maximum of plus 100. Like, I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. And then getting the Berserker effect of being able to survive 1 lethal blow as well. It's going to make your Valkyria really hard to bring down and guarantee that they're dealing a lot of damage in the process. Very cool ability, very cool skill set all around. I cannot wait to use more of Virginia going forward. Her Valor skills, again, I don't believe change in any way on promotion. Again, if that is incorrect, let me know in the comments, but I don't remember seeing any changes after I promoted her. Yeah, Valkyria, Crusader, absolutely an awesome class. I love them to death. I think they're super cool. Just like the 2 shield and great shield thing, man. It's awesome. Big damage, big tanking. Gotta love it. For this next set of classes, as Bestrels, they all get a lot of bonuses for fighting at night. In general, this is a more offense than defense-oriented bonus. You're looking at the Were-Fox, the Were-Wolf, and the Were-Lion for offense. Your tank/support in Were-Bear and Were-Owl both do their job perfectly fine day or night. They do get some bonuses, of course, but still. They don't mind it, but they aren't as hungry for it as the scrappier classes are. Keep that in mind. Figured I'd put it out there now instead of repeating it every time for each class. So, Werewolves. Werewolves are an interesting class. Their best role is as squishy unit destroyers, because they've got solid damage, bonuses if the enemy gets weaker or fewer in number on the battlefield, and yeah, they are fragile, and they struggle against more heavily armored enemies sometimes, although I have found that my werewolf still shreds feather shields, which is nice. But with big damage that gets bigger and the ability to do AoE as well, groups of squishies like clerics, healers, or even dangerous targets like Vikings can fold more quickly than you might expect. They are widely considered by the community to be the worst unit in the game, or I should say the worst class in the game. I don't really agree with that sentiment. I mean, honestly, just you give werewolves a shot, especially at night where they can flank the enemy and get at their squishies with alarming ease. They're pretty solid. Stuff like Wild Fang to attack rows of enemies, I love. Finishing Stab, getting extra damage if you actually defeat the target, and then you can do more damage later on in the fight. That's a ton of fun. Decimate, dealing more damage if enemies are fewer in number. There's a lot of good stuff going on. And that's to say nothing of Bestial Howl that grants allies in the user's row plus 15% physical attack. Like, I don't know, man. I think werewolves are pretty damn solid. They deserve a bit more credit than people give them credit for, and I think you should try them out. They're a good time. Moving on to Were-Foxes. These are definitely the most technical of the Bestial classes. The Were-Fox is more of an evade and disable specialist compared to the more raw damage focus of the Werewolf, but they can also deal damage, don't get me wrong. They have things like blinds and poisons, they can seal passive abilities, they can deal bonus damage to enemies that are debuffed, which an attack that ignores defense is unguardable. Like, they have nice stuff going on here. Pursuits, all that type of good stuff. As spear units, they can pierce enemy columns as well, deal bonus damage to cavalry. Like, there's a lot of nice stuff going on here. The natural evasion that they get, you can see they have A rank accuracy, S rank evasion, crit rate, and initiative means that they are extremely hard to hit, and of course they are a scout class, so that makes sense. Even before they get the nighttime bonuses that they get, like, they're really, really hard to hit without True Strike. Of course, like werewolves and other scouts in general, Were-Foxes are very, very fragile, but they're just as good at flanking, actually possibly even more when you consider their Valor skill jump that allows them to just immediately jump to an allied or enemy unit, which is awesome. And they can deal with the tanks that werewolves can't due to their venom, thrust, poisoning attacks, blinds, etc. Again, I love Were-Foxes. I think they're a ton of fun. I have had some truly alarming situations where I thought a unit was just going to fold, and then Incarnate here, my Were-Fox, just dodge tanked through a distressing amount of enemy attacks. So don't count werefoxes out. I think they're a super, super fun class. Very cool. And I do tend to like them more than rogues because they just feel like they have more going on. Just like the pursuits and the weakness hunter alone make them my scout of choice for a frontline, potentially backline, poisony, blindy type of class. Now, werebears. Any of you who are familiar with my campaign are familiar with Antonio, the absolute unit himself. Werebears are the designated tank of the Bestial bunch. They're a very interesting mix as well, because they kind of, while they are a tank, they're more of a balance between something like a Legionnaire and a Berserker with an equal mix of offense and defense. Of all the tanks, these are definitely the most focused on protecting themselves. They're very good with Heavy Guard, Nocturnal Rest to recover their own HP, things like that. Not something that you're looking at protecting your allies as much, but I mean, you can maybe throw a shield on. That's going to allow you to do that. Nothing wrong with being a solo tank, though. Sometimes you just got to be the one guy who stands in the front and takes all the hits, and everyone else has to kind of look out for themselves beyond that. You're already getting hit, right? And of course, the benefit of not having a kit that's focused on defending your allies is that you can actually have a lot more offensive capability. Bear Crush, inflicting stun, Round Swing attacking a row of enemies and dealing more damage the more HP you have. Earthshaker attacking all enemies, unguardable, ranged, get more damage the less HP you have, so finish off with Earthshaker and just deal a ton of damage to the enemy. I really, really like the kit that Werebear has going on. You know, having strong AoE attacks, potentially hit multiple times, actually viable to stack some damage buffs on them, then you let them take the hits, come out swinging with their attacks, clap back for a surprising amount of damage. Like, Werebears can clean up. It's really nice. Of course, they do still have their downsides. Anything to do with magic is awful. They've got poor accuracy. They can't dodge anything, not that you want them to in the first place, and they've got really low initiative. But, I mean, that's what you want from a tank, really. They get the job done with a little bit of support for anti-magic capabilities. A Werebear is going to be distressingly difficult to bring down, and is by far going to be the highest damage tank that you have, especially compared to the other options that are on hand. Very good at their role. Highly recommend that you give them a shot. Now, Were Owls, these are definitely an interesting one, and I've flip-flopped on my feelings with them a lot, but they're still a very solid choice. Were Owls, of course, are the support arm of the Bestial Force. As a flying healer and support unit, they have a lot of hats they can wear, and that versatility is very appreciated. I mean, look at this. They can fly, they're a caster, they are also bestial, so they can navigate terrain, they get bonus speed at night, they get the extra dodge rate versus grounded melee. They get just better stats in general at night as well. They have healing assist. Like, there's a ton of stuff that a Were Owl can do for you. And having that level of versatility, as you guys should know by now, is very important to me when you have them in a squad. So, I do really appreciate what they bring to the table here. Their main focus lies primarily in anti-magic and anti-debuff with some health regen as well. It's kind of allows them to compete with Sainted Knights a little bit. Like, you have a greater focus on buffing allies and less of a focus on shielding allies. Things like Circle Barrier, reducing damage taken by all allies by 20% for one attack, or 25%, is like essentially a shield. It's really damn good, don't get me wrong. But I've found that I do tend to use my Were Owls in a similar way to my Sainted Knights. Now, that said, being a wielder of staves means that you can get a lot more support versatility going on here, having different staffs on hand that have different effects. Holy Cradle, Reincarnation, Magic Shell, Parting Resurrection, all extremely good options that a Were Owl is happy to have. Now, some of the buffs that they provide are a little bit niche. Like, yeah, you can grant a row of allies plus 50 accuracy. At night makes their hits True Strike, which is awesome, but again, you're limited to it being at night. Aurora Veil, giving health regen, extra magic defense, can be quite good if you have a frontline tanky oriented team that gets folded by magic. Not bad. And then being able to give extra passive points or move buffs from a single enemy. Like, there's certainly good options here, but they are a little bit more niche. They are not going to be an outright healer compared to something like, say, a cleric, unless you give them a staff that will let them do that job, which you can do. Of course, as a flying bestial, they can be great squad leaders when night falls and they start just zooming across all of terrain. Ultimately, Were Owls are one of the better defense-oriented healers in the game, but you do have to keep in mind that some of their buffs can be pretty niche, so watch out for that. Now, we have to skip past some of the angels here to talk about Were Lion really quick. This is going to be an extremely short one. Murad the Were Lion is literally just a berserker, but better. It is a little bit disappointing, honestly, that he doesn't have more going on here, but he has literally the exact same skills as a berserker. The only difference is that he's a bestial, so he gets increased stats at night, and he moves faster at night, which means he is just a strictly better Berserker. Don't get me wrong. Like, if you like Berserkers, you're going to like Werelion, and I highly recommend that you use him, because Mirard can be really nasty, especially at nighttime. That's really all there is to say about that. So, yeah, we're going to move on. Speaking of moving on, we're going to talk about Unifi next, since she does come with the Bestral units, so I figured it only makes sense to slot her in here. Snow Ranger is arguably the most powerful class in the game. She's an archer. It is, again, the unique class of Unifi. Has excellent single and area damage output. Mystic Arrow deals additional magic attack of 100 potency to armored targets. Alright, so you're an armored killer. But wait, Sonic Shaft, attack a single enemy, deals 100% of target's initiative and additional damage. Okay, so you're a speedy target killer. But oh wait, Glacial Rain. Attack all enemies. 3 hits, 60 physical potency, ranged charge, inflicts freeze on everything. Okay, so we are an AoE damage dealer and debuffer / control unit. Eagle Eye, guaranteed true strike. Okay, so we can snipe scouts. Triple counter, attacks after an enemy attacks with an active skill. Counterattack 3 enemies. So we're an enemy phase counter unit. But wait, activates after an ally attack. Snow White Strike, follow-up attack a single enemy, inflicts freeze, plus 100 potency versus frozen targets. So we're a freeze synergy follow-up unit. Can you see how this gets a little bit ridiculous? This is one of those classes that you're happy to have in literally any squad. Like, Unifi's just phenomenal. She can fulfill so many different roles. Her stats are insane. She's got phenomenal evasion. Like, she's not even a scout. She's just an infantry archer, but she's got evasion that rivals most scouts. You can literally just slap her on the front line and laugh as she never gets hit by anything. She's got an S and crit. Like, it's just... someone was, like, cracked out of their mind when they made Unifi. It's insane. I highly recommend that you use this class if you have not already been. I cannot wait to use more of her during my challenge mode run, where I'm using all of the unique characters. And then, if you didn't need anything else, you have these awesome Valor skills. Extra Assist. Increases assist damage by 50% and negates stamina consumption for all allied units within range for 1 battle. Like, do you just have a bunch of mage squads and archer squads? Well, congratulations. All of their assists do more damage, and now none of them are using stamina for the first time that they use it. Like, for 1 Valor point in an area. Absolutely insane. And then how about Passive Snipe? Decrease an enemy unit's starting passive points by 1. It's 3 Valor, but, like, the entire enemy unit loses a passive point. You know how much of a tempo change that is? It's just ridiculous. Everything is upside with Snow Ranger, on top of the fact that Unifi's a cutie. Just... use Snow Ranger. She's phenomenal in so many different ways. Next up, I want to talk about Dreadnought before we move on to the Angels. Just try and get all of these little unique classes out of the way. Dreadnought is, of course, the unique class of Amalia, the huge lady herself. This is the Uber tank that hits everything insanely hard. Amalia is very adept at dealing damage to 1 or 2 enemies at a time. Heavy Slash, 150 damage. Penetrate, attack a column of enemies, physical defense minus 30%. Omega Shatter, attack a single enemy twice for 100 physical potency per swing, and it's unguardable. Like, Amalia is going to pick someone and detonate them. Now note, most of her attacks can't be guarded against. Very, very nice. She can reduce enemy defense. She's really good at taking physical damage. Like, if it is a physical-oriented fight, Amalia is going to be top dog. At the end of the day, though, she really wants someone else to heal her, deal AoE damage, or keep her from getting nuked by magic. Those are things that she has to watch out for. If you have a team that wants a big damage dealer and a tank, Amalia will be right at home there. She is going to be very good at dealing a lot of damage. She's going to be very good at surviving a lot of damage. But she has no way to heal herself, and she has no way of protecting herself from magic. So, she's not broken by any means, as much as you might think otherwise. But she is phenomenal, and she can slot into pretty much any team on the front line. So, go for it. Now, bopping back to our feather units, we have to talk about feather swords. These are the bread and butter frontline class for feather units. And while Bestrels are the designated nighttime race, feather swords and angels in general are the daytime race. Note, it is not as dramatic of a difference as it is for Bestrels. We're not getting huge stat increases during the day like the Bestrels do at night, but we do get extra effects for some of our skills, so it is still good to have them fighting during the day where possible. Also notably, all angels are flyers with all the advantages such as navigating terrain and disadvantages such as dying quickly to archers that you would expect, so keep that in mind as well. Now, back to Feather Sword. Like I said, these are your designated frontline damage dealers for Angels, and they perform the role well. They don't have extraordinary damage, but if you need something to be able to hold on the front line, tank and spank, sword and board, then these are going to be your girls. Their focus is primarily on buffs and debuffs over just raw damage, things like Spiral Sword, nuking enemy evasion, granting you evasions, Shield Smite, nuking enemy defense, granting you defense. This is where you can kind of see a reciprocal change here. You're essentially draining stats off the enemy and giving them to yourself, which is pretty awesome. This will then synergize into the ultimate ability Honed Slash, that pretty good amount of damage, honestly, here to a single enemy, and becomes True Strike if the user is buffed, which is pretty dope. So you can pop scouts and dodge enemies with this, which is very nice. And then your passive skills are also looking at largely buffs as well. Accelerate, granting you initiative and accuracy. Diurnal Guard being a block, which you would imagine you'd probably have on a shield unit like this, and grants you passive point during the day, which is nice. And then Discharge, this is the big one, consumes all of the user's buffs and increases attack power for one attack, the number of consumed buffs times 25%. This is where you can get like Discharge into Honed Slash, becomes True Strike, you get all of this damage buff, and you just crush. It's pretty awesome, I'm not going to lie. It takes some setup, it's a little bit finicky, but if you can get it to go off, it is a ton of fun. Of course, you can also combo this class with something else that's giving you buffs, something like, say, I don't know, something with a Dancer's Call, or maybe a Prince, things like that, and you're going to be laughing all the way to the bank. Now, Feather Bows, this is where the true power and terror of Angels comes to light. If you have played any Unicorn Overlord and you have made it to Albion, you know that feathers are horrifying when they're wielding bows. Feather Bows are debuff masters. They sit in the back line to pick away at the enemy and make it very hard for them to do anything about it. Their big selling point, Shining Light. Activates before an enemy uses an attack skill. Any enemy. Inflicts blindness on a row of enemies. It is hit rate true. It is ranged. You cannot avoid this unless you are literally immune to blind, and having even just one Featherbow in your squad ready to use this skill is going to massively reduce the amount of damage that your squad is going to be tanking. Remember, you're nullifying up to 3 attacks for 2 passive points here, which is just insanely strong, both in your hands and the hands of the enemy. Combine that with the fact that you have things like Photon Arrow, inflicting physical defense down on 2 enemies, Saint's Shot reducing passive points, Delaying Shot reducing initiative. Featherbows are just going to be a giant pain in the ass for your enemy if you're using them, or for you if the enemy's using them on you. So be prepared for this. Either try and snipe them quickly, have some blind reduction, blind immunity, debuff removal, anything like that. You're going to need it when you're dealing with Featherbows. They are a very strong class, possibly the strongest of the 4 Angel classes. Now, what is not the strongest of the 4 Angel classes are the Feather Staves, unfortunately, because they're super cool. The requisite healer of the group, Feather Staves are definitely interesting. To separate themselves from other healers, Feather Staves have 2 major focuses, overhealing and healing over time, with a little bit of a dose of resurrection as well. Their overheal ability is really fun, seeing as how it allows you to give temp HP to a row of allies, which can make even like really frail classes like Swordmasters far tankier than you would think they have any right to be. They can also apply a rare, if not the most useful, HP regen with things like Hastened Call, or the ability to get extra healing when your HP is restored, the ability to withstand 1 lethal blow. Like, there's some niche, finicky tech options here with Feather Staves that can be nice if you're set up to use it properly, but at the same time, you could just drop a bishop in and get all of your healing needs taken care of, so it's a little bit finicky. In particular, Holy Cradle, making it so that you can withstand 1 lethal blow, is really fun, but it's what we call a little bit of a planning to lose strategy, so not exactly the situation you want to be in, but it is very useful when it's useful, no doubt about that. Then, of course, you can combine that with the natural versatility of the staff user to have a lot of other options for things that you can do, so it's not terrible. Like, they will keep you alive. It just, again, feels a little finicky compared to something like a bishop. Of course, you do get the ability to remove some afflictions, get some extra passive points back because they're angels, as long as it's daytime. Like, there's some good stuff here, but it's just not my first pick. It's probably my least favorite of all of the staff-wielding support classes. They're not terrible. They can fly. They are going to keep you alive, but not my favorite either. Now, what is my favorite is the Feather Shield. Look at these Giga Chads. God, I love them. Feather Shield is just such a cool class. It's just straight up the anti-magic version of Legionnaire through and through. A bit of a self-sacrifice angle, which is a fun time. While you don't really have full row protection like you do with a Legionnaire, you can give everyone magic defense up. And I mean, when I say everyone, like, if it's during the day, I mean literally everyone. Otherwise, it's a row, but still. Which is essentially the same thing as having row cover on a Legionnaire. You've got Mystic Shield to grant the user extra magic defense and passive points. You do have a basic attack that it does inflict minus magic defense on an enemy, so in a mage-based squad, actually not terrible. There's some cool stuff going on, and it's very much the counterpart to the Legionnaire in a lot of ways. What's really nice, though, is you do have Sacrifice, so even though you can't necessarily jump in the way with a guard for an ally, you can literally just cover an ally and take the hit yourself, which, if you have good defensive stats, can be essentially the same thing, and it also grants you extra passive points as well, so there's a lot of passive point generation on Feather Shields that you can mess around with tech-wise. And yeah, while they are definitely the anti-magic tank, it's not that hard to give yourself extra physical defense just through things like, you know, Great Shields. Toss a Grand Barris on there, and suddenly your physical defense not looking too shabby. So I kind of like Feather Shields over Legionnaires in most scenarios. They're going to be tanky enough physically and magically to handle pretty much any major situation, and they can guard your allies for you in the ways that you need to. Then, finally, they can reflect magic and remove debuffs from themselves to put them on an enemy target, which is just a ton of fun. Like, there's just... Once you get to the late game and there's so much more magic damage flying around, so many more debuffs flying around, having Feather Shields to be able to counteract that is a huge boon in my mind. There's a lot of situations that I prefer them in. It's really just a shame that we get them so late. But if you haven't messed around with Feather Shields yet because you get them late, I implore you to try. You get a free one in Fedoquia, like, use him. See how they function. You will be glad that you did. Finally, we need to talk about the Dark Marquess classes really quick. Just to wrap up here, we have, of course, already talked about Berengaria, but now I do know you get one of each of the Dark Marquess classes by the time you clear the game, do the final post-campaign mission. And, I mean, really the main thing to point out is that they're all phenomenal. Like, every single Dark Marquess class is an absolute unit, and you're going to be more than happy to have them in any squad that you put them in. Some are better than others, like I would argue that Berengaria and Alcina are probably the best. Berengaria, as we know, with all of her debuff synergies and tankiness, ability to get passive points back, drain health from enemies, all that type of good stuff, like, she's insane. But, I mean, Nigel, having all of this burn synergy, extra stun stuff, reducing enemy defense, there's a ton of different comps that you'd be happy to have him in. Alcina being the mage of the group, debuffing enemies, putting poisons on them, dealing good damage, especially synergizing with poison. And then, of course, Elgor just being a super annoying, dodgy, stunny, burny, debuffy, can't hit me, can't touch me, giving himself passive points, forcing enemies to attack him, and then dodging everything. Like, he's so good. Like, every single one of the Marquess classes are great, and it's nice that they're all different because they all have their own little synergies that you can build them into. Alcina wants to be in a poison synergy team. Nigel wants to be in a burn synergy team. Berengaria wants to be in an affliction synergy team. And then Elgor wants to be wherever you want there to be an insanely good dodge tank who's also going to harry everyone on the enemy team with all the debuffs imaginable. All the Dark Marquess classes are phenomenal. You should be using them if you have not already, especially once you unlock things like Elgor and Alcina. And with that said, this has been the comprehensive class overview for Unicorn Overlord. What an odyssey this has been. Thank you all so much for watching. I do very much appreciate it. I know interest in Unicorn Overlord has been winding down, so again, I appreciate everyone who has been sticking around. I am still tossing around the idea of doing individual class deep dives. If that's something that people would be interested in, I would be more than happy to do so, because I do think it would be a really fun discussion to have for each of the classes. Don't know if we would get them all done, but it's something that I'd be happy to chip away at when and where I have the chance. Let me know what your thoughts are on that in the comments down below, and let me know what you think of my overall overview of each of these classes too. I would very much appreciate that feedback. With that said, I'm going to be done here. My name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, and remember, be good to each other. Bye now.